Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Sprague and Assistant District Attorney Shannon Buckingham.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Counsel.
Morning.
Good morning, Ms. Clancy.
Good morning, Your Honor.
All right. So are we ready for the jury?
We are.
All right. So what we'll do is can I see Counsel just very briefly, just in regards to today's schedule?
All rise. Jurors in.
What's the next exhibit? What's the next exhibit?
292. LBBB.
Hey, all persons having anything to do before the Honorable William Sullivan, Justice of the Superior Court, now sitting at Plymouth, within and for the Commonwealth. Draw near and give your attendance, and you shall be heard. By the state of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, this court is now in session. Please be seated.
Good morning, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, before the court today, we have the continuation of the jury trial in the matter of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. Ms. Clancy is present. She is represented by Attorney Kevin Reddington. The Commonwealth is represented by Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Sprague and Assistant District Attorney Shannon Buckingham.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, members of the jury. I hope everybody had a nice weekend. And so what we're going to do, as we have done so many times before, I'm going to ask you those questions, and then we're kind of going to go over what today's schedule is, and then we'll get right back to the trial. So the first question: has any member of the jury read, seen, heard, or overheard anything from any source about any aspect of this case that would affect your ability to be a fair and impartial juror? All right. Last question: is there any other serious matter of concern bearing on your service as a juror in this case that anybody needs to bring to my attention at this time? Again, thank you so much for following those instructions. What we are going to do from the schedule today, if you remember on Friday, we were in during cross-examination of Dr. Mack, who had testified Friday afternoon. We're going to return to the cross-examination, and the only difference is Dr. Mack is going to be available by Zoom here. We've had a couple other witnesses, so you all kind of know how that's going to work. So we're going to finish the cross-examination of Dr. Mack by Zoom. Commonwealth, if they have redirect question, and then we're going to continue with the Commonwealth's rebuttal. All right, and so just to kind of go back as far as the procedures that we followed, so the Commonwealth presented their case. Then after they were done, the defendant presented their case, and we're now on to the Commonwealth's rebuttal. All right, and when the Commonwealth's rebuttal is done, we're going to move to the next portion of the procedure process, which will be the closing arguments and the legal instructions. All right, so that comes after the Commonwealth's rebuttal witnesses. So that's kind of where we are at this point. And so as we go through today, I'll kind of keep you up to date in regards to the schedule for going forward. All right, so that's where we are. So at this point, I'm going to, we'll get Dr. Mack on the screen, and then it'll be Mr. Reddington continuing cross-examination. Yeah, please.
Dr. Mack, could you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony and the evidence you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Attorney Reddington.
Thank you. Sir, how many times have you testified in courts on the issue of criminal responsibility?
I would estimate 1 or 2.
So if you estimate 1 or 2 times, would this be your 3rd time?
By that estimation, yes.
Okay, so it's not by my estimation, though, it's by your estimation, and you would know better than me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the third time in your career that you've testified on a criminal trial on the issue of lack of criminal responsibility. Is that correct?
I know there are other times that I've created opinions.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm not sure how many.
I'm just asking about criminal responsibility. That's it.
I'm talking about criminal responsibility. And I know there are other times I've created opinions, but I'm not sure that I've testified about them
Okay.
in the courtroom.
So my question was simply, how many times have you testified in court on criminal cases regarding the issue of lack of criminal responsibility, and this would be your third time, right?
That is my recollection.
Okay. And you have testified in court on behalf of various governmental agencies on other matters in addition to criminal responsibility, correct?
Yes.
And you are operating under the umbrella, if you will, of the Park Dietz conglomerate of a lot of expert witnesses that, as I understand, would parcel out cases to different people. Is that right?
There are times that I do cases through Park Dietz and Associates. I can't speak to how many experts they have and exactly how they, as you put it, parcel things out. But over the span of my career, there have been times that I've done it when cases have been presented through Park Dietz and Associates, and times that I've done it through other entities. As I discussed the other day, I had a role for the state of Maryland, and at times, and in this case, there was a criminal responsibility trial that I was a part of when I had a role for the state of Maryland. So going throughout my career, it's been multiple different entities.
You've also testified, since we're talking about it, in the state of Pennsylvania, right?
What's your question?
You've also testified, since we're talking about it, in the state of Pennsylvania, right?
I believe I have.
Was that at Park Dietz, or was that you individually, or one of your other entities?
You'd have to specify which case.
Commonwealth versus Torres, 342 MAL 2021, Pennsylvania.
Can you cite that case again, please?
Sure. Commonwealth versus Torres, 342 MAL 2021, Pennsylvania, where the court held that that would be Abram Mack, was apparently certified only in child and adolescent psychiatry. You lacked forensic certification to testify in the field that you were ostensibly going to testify in. Does that refresh your memory?
No.
Did you testify in? Did you testify in Commonwealth versus Torres in Pennsylvania?
I don't remember.
How about Commonwealth versus Carter in New Jersey? You remember that one?
No.
Do you recall that the court held on an appeal that you used an approach that fell below the standard of forensic practice?
No.
How about Feder LeBron versus the Secretary of DCF, 710 Fed 3rd, 1202 in Florida? You remember that case, I'm sure, right?
I do.
And in Feder, there was a gentleman, Mr. Feder LeBron, who was a Navy veteran, who was a single father and had a child. And he was a member or a person that was able to get benefits from what's called TANF, T-A-N-F, Temporary Aid to Needy Families. You remember that?
I do.
And the state of Florida decided that because needy families consisted of either minorities or drug users or people that would not be reliable to work in the confines of working underneath the TANF, so they wanted to have blood testing and drug testing of all the people that were temporary aid to needy families, right?
That's your conception of what was happening with that.
Well, that's my conception from reading the case, sir. Do you agree, sir, that TANF is an acronym for temporary aid to needy families?
Yes, it is.
Do you agree, sir, that this gentleman, Mr. Feder LeBron, was a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the state of Florida?
Yes.
Do you agree, sir, that it was in federal court?
Yes.
You agree, sir, that in federal court, the court held that, in fact, you were unqualified to give an opinion that you attempted to give, saying that it was perfectly appropriate to test by way of urine or blood people that are benefiting from the TANF program, because your testimony was that they belong to a class of people that, I guess, had to be tested. Right?
I don't agree with your conceptualization.
Okay, so the court ultimately ruled that your argument, your testimony on behalf of the state of Florida, the government, and you indicated that TANF benefits, applicants for TANF were people that were involved with drug use, violence, and higher rates of suicide. Remember those words, those three words?
The testimony that I provided.
Do you remember testifying, sir, about the people that are the beneficiaries of the TANF program, people that need aid because of needy families, are people that should be tested by way of blood or urine? And your argument, sir, was because they are of a class that would be more likely to commit a crime or have suicide or drug use. Did you testify to that?
That is not the way that that testimony or that report was presented. No,
okay,
I disagree.
so your answer is no. Let's keep it that way. Your answer is no. So you recall, sir, that there was an appeal, and in fact, on the appeal, it was determined that, again, yet again, you were not qualified to offer a relevant opinion because, number one, you never studied the TANF population. Recall that?
No, that is not the correct conceptualization.
Says you. Number two, that you did not survey any data. Recall that, sir?
Specifically in Florida is the nuance on that issue.
And number three, that you had no research whatsoever on the data that you based your opinion on. Would you agree with that, sir?
No.
Do you agree, sir, that the court held that you relied on other researchers' studies and didn't make any effort whatsoever to form an opinion based on your own research? Do you agree with that?
I don't remember the specific language of the court.
All right. Do you recall that ultimately your testimony was stricken?
No, I don't believe that it was stricken.
Okay. In any event, sir, you would agree with me that you have a memory of Avram Mack being subject to this attack, if you will, by the attorneys on behalf of the people that were involved with TANF, right? You remember that much, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Thank you. Now, in summary, sir, you're here to testify in front of this jury regarding your testimony and opinion that you've given regarding Lindsay Clancy's state of mind at the time of the killing of her children. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you evaluated her in 2026. Is that right?
Yes.
So you really evaluated her about 3 years after the incident that occurred in January 22, right?
January 2023.
So you do recall the date that the incident occurred, 23, right?
Right. So to answer your question about
the answer is right.
Yeah.
Okay. And in reference to your answer, sir, you would agree with me that there was a significant passage of time between the incident in 2023 and when you saw her about 2 or 3 months ago, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you drove out there with the guy that's going to be in here testifying in about an hour or so, Helbrun. Is it Helbrun or Heilbrun?
When you say that I drove out there,
I'm just asking the guy's name. Is it Helbrun or Heilbrun?
you'll have to ask him how he likes to pronounce it.
Well, did you know how to call him or what to call him when you were out there with him for 2 days at Tewksbury?
Kirk.
Kirk, okay. And you met Kirk, I imagine, that morning that you were going to evaluate Lindsay?
Yes.
And what was the date that you evaluated her? Was it February
I
date?
think the first date was April 10th.
Okay.
The second date was April 12th, and those were the 2 days that I was there.
Right, because Kirk had to give her psychological testing on the middle day, right?
Correct.
Okay, so did you stay in a hotel or a van, or where'd you stay?
You're asking me where I stayed?
Yeah, I don't want to meet up. I just want to know where you stayed.
I stayed in Massachusetts.
Where?
I believe in Wellesley.
Where? Was it like Holiday Inn? Was it a Ritz-Carlton? Where?
A private home.
A private home, okay. Kirk didn't stay there, did he?
I don't know.
You don't
No,
know?
he didn't stay there. He didn't stay there, that's for sure.
Okay. So in any event, you must have had plans to meet up with Kirk at Tewksbury Hospital, right?
I did meet Dr. Halpern at Tewksbury Hospital, yes.
Okay, I'm calling him Kirk because that's what you told me is that you refer to him as. But Dr. Hoffman, how do you pronounce it?
I believe it's Halpern, but you'll have to ask him how he prefers it.
Okay, I will. And then did you meet him in the parking lot of Tewksbury?
Yes, I think that's right.
And
Or
you
in the
had,
lobby.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Or in the lobby.
Okay. So when you went there on that date in April, the first day, you already had your information that you were able to form your opinion based upon. Is that right?
At the time that I initiated the examination, I had reviewed records related to Ms. Clancy, but creation of the ultimate opinion.
No. I'm asking about the records, sir. Real simple. The records that you reviewed. You had already reviewed them before you went to Tewksbury Hospital. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And the records would be, obviously, cell phone extraction records, yes?
I don't know exactly when I reviewed the cell phone records.
How about defense expert forensic psychiatric evaluations? Dr. Philip Resnick, Dr. Margaret Spinelli, you reviewed the reports that were already prepared by my experts. Is that correct?
And also Dr. Zeizel.
Zeizel, yeah, thank you. Okay, because I had sent them to you, isn't that right?
You had sent them, I believe, to Dr. Heilbronn.
To Dr. who? I'm sorry.
I think Dr. Kirk Heilbronn. And I think he was able to give them to me.
Okay, fine. So you also were able to review Division or Department of Children and Family Records dated February 3rd of 2023, correct?
Correct.
And those would be records that pertained, obviously, after the death of the children, but it was just an interview of Patrick, the father, and Lindsay's husband, right? That's what those were.
That was a substantial component of that, but that was the DCF evaluation that occurred, and they, I believe, interviewed him when he was at Boston Children's Hospital.
Okay, all I'm asking is that the DCF, in other words, there's no DCF records that shows that Lindsay was abusive to her children, right?
I don't think that that was necessarily the conclusion of that report.
Well, it wasn't a conclusion of any report. There were no other reports other than February 3rd, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and that would be interviewing Pat, the father and the husband, right?
As I said, I think effectively that is the core component of that report.
Okay, that's the component of the report. The answer is yes. You also had medical records from Astor Mental Health Records, right?
Yes.
That would be Jennifer Tufts?
Yes.
Jennifer McAllister, right?
I'm not sure if that's the name of another doctor in that practice, but substantially Astor Mental Health included the work of Dr. Tufts.
Dr. Tufts. And how about nurse practitioner Gelada? Did you review her records as well?
The records of hers that came from the organization that she worked in, yes.
What organization was that, do you know?
I'm not exactly recalling the title of it, but I believe it's South Shore mental health, but I'm not exactly sure of the exact title.
Boston Children's Hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and McLean Hospital records. You reviewed them, correct?
Yes.
Spalding Rehab, right?
Yep.
Tewksbury Hospital from March 27th of 23 up through April 1st of 26, which is a little bit before you saw Lindsay, right?
Correct.
They were about 7,000 pages, a lot of paper, right?
Yes.
Toxicology records, police reports, grand jury testimony, you read all that too, right?
Correct.
Police interviews of witnesses, right?
Correct.
And you had met with, I imagine, or spoken to, by telephone perhaps, with the district attorneys, the prosecutors here.
Yes.
And where did you meet them?
The prosecutors?
Yeah.
Only by phone.
Okay, so you met them by phone. When was that?
I don't know offhand when that was.
How long was the conversation?
I don't recall. It could have been somewhere between 15 minutes to 45 minutes.
And basically they told you that they wanted you to evaluate a defendant who had been indicted for triple homicide of her own children by the name of Lindsay Clancy. You knew that from speaking with them, right?
Effectively, I knew that, yes.
And, you know, I normally don't go there with expert witnesses, but it was fair game on Dr. Zeizel. How much money do you make a year on your forensic evaluations?
It ranges over the years, several $100,000 of dollars.
Yeah.
Can be a few.
And a lot of that,
more.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So a lot of that would be appointed cases or cases either from Park Dietz or some other warehouse that asks you to evaluate people and testify in the court, right?
Or over the years, people contact me directly.
Really?
We're talking about over the last 15 to 20 years.
Right. So when you were contacted by, strike that, did the DAs here call you or did you call them?
I don't recall.
Do you recall that they told you what a horrible case this was, that this woman killed her 3 children by strangling them? Did they tell you that?
Sustained. Next question.
Well, did you know what the factual allegations were of the case? Yes or no?
Well, all the factual allegations, yes, I believe they were conveyed to me during a phone call.
Yeah. Okay. And when you were engaged or retained through Park Dietz and Associates to work for the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office, I mean, that's fair to say. You were working for them, right?
Effectively, I was retained by the District Attorney's Office, yes.
All right. And let's talk about confirmatory bias. You know what that is?
Well, you were asking me the other day about the cognitive bias think tank, and we talked about how, as a part of my work in patient safety.
No. This is Doctor.
I would like to be able
Hold on, Doctor, please. Listen to the question and answer the question. Go ahead.
This is confirmatory bias, sir, not a think tank talking about safety of anybody, okay? Confirmatory bias. Have you heard of that term?
I have.
And what does it mean?
Well, if you're talking about the work in diagnosis in medicine, as I was getting at before, it refers to the idea that an individual has an idea as to what they're aiming for, and they gather information that accedes to that, and that brings that point together.
Okay. So would you agree with me, sir, that when you are retained in your practice, working whether it's for Dietz or somebody else, and you are engaged by a prosecutor, such as the Plymouth County DA's office, is it fair to say that you go into your work and your evaluation, and I hesitate to use the word investigation, but you have a confirmatory bias? You're hoping that you're going to be able to help them out, right?
No.
No. Okay. So you had read all this material, you had spoken with the prosecutors, and I imagine you had done a team back with Kirk Heilbrunn, right?
A what?
You talked to Kirk Heilbrunn about the fact that you guys were going to go in and evaluate Lindsay, right?
We had worked with the prosecutors, and I believe them with you.
No, you didn't. Excuse me. You didn't work with me. What do you mean? You didn't work with me.
I imagine there was interactions in terms of setting up the dates on which this would occur.
I had nothing to do with it. My office manager, Laura Mather, would have done that. I had nothing to do with it, sir.
Yeah, okay, next question.
So when you went out there on the 2 days that you went out, forget the middle day, because that's when Kurt was by himself. When you went out there, the two of you met in the parking lot or the lobby, one or the other, correct?
Yes.
Yes?
I said yes.
And the purpose was to go interview her, right?
Ms. Clancy, yes.
So you guys go down the hallway, you go in the elevator, you go upstairs to the locked wards, they have to open the door, they have orderlies and people that escort you. Is that right?
Yes.
You have to sign in, you have to have ID because it's a locked ward, right?
Effectively, yes.
Effectively. And the two of you, you and Kirk, go into a room where she's sitting in her wheelchair by herself so that you two of you can interview her. Is that correct?
Yes.
For how many hours did you interview her the first time?
First day, it was roughly ended up being about, I think, 4 or 5 hours.
And have in mind, sir, as counsel has already elicited, she's incontinent. She has issues because of being paralyzed and had to have a break, didn't she?
She did not ask for a break.
Oh, she was able to power through the 4 hours?
I don't know if that's the appropriate way to frame it. We took a break. During the interview, we discussed the schedule that she has for catheterization, if that's your question.
So you and Kirk Heilbrunn sat down and you questioned Lindsay, the both of you together or one at a time, or how'd that work out?
One would ask questions, and if another one had additional questions to ask about that particular topic, then the other would ask. And
she was, fair to say, she was pretty cooperative with you guys, right?
Yes.
She was polite, she was affable, right?
Yes.
She answered your questions, right?
Yes.
And then when you concluded that first day, then the next day, Kurt Heilbrunn went on his own to Tewksbury and had another multi-hour interrogation, questioning, or whatever of Lindsay, right?
He was there for a second day for psychological testing.
So you're aware of the fact that he was there for psychological testing, right?
Yes.
Now, a psychiatrist doesn't do psychological testing. The psychologist does, right?
Typically, that's true.
And there are a number of tests that are administered to people when they are being evaluated for purposes of a criminal case such as this, right?
There is a number of different tests that test different aspects of an individual's psychiatric or psychologic or cognitive functioning.
Right. Like, for example, you want to determine, I would imagine, whether or not they're lying or exaggerating or minimizing their symptoms, right?
That's always an interest, yes.
And it's of interest because if a person is, in fact, masking or lying about their mind, trying to fake out an evaluating forensic psychiatrist or psychologist, when you say that's of interest, that's something that can be a test result that a jury could look at, right?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a test that specifically states a person is lying.
No. You ever heard of the MMPA?
I have.
Okay. You ever heard of the K scale?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the K scale is among the internal validity scales of the MMPI. The
Okay.
MMPI is an assessment of the individual's personality.
Okay. So let's focus on the K scale, sir. When you say that let me ask you again, what is your understanding of what the K scale is seeking to find out?
I answer this in the context of the purpose of the MMPI and what the MMPI is designed.
What are you smiling for? This is not funny, sir.
Sustained. Next
Well,
question.
you know-
Next question.
MMPI, K scale, focus. What does it mean, sir?
So the MMPI is an assessment of personality, and it is a set of questions that the individual responds to provide the test and to provide the user of the test to understand what is their personality like. The K scale is a set of questions embedded in the MMPI that are designed to see whether or not the individual is exaggerating in their responses, generally speaking.
Okay. Or lying, right? They call the K scale the lie scale, right?
Well, if you're simply referring to your own personality style, the issue is whether or not the answers are reliable or valid. It's not a matter of assessing if the person is lying on the MMPI.
Does the MMPI assess to any degree whether or not a person is lying, in your opinion?
No.
No? So let's stay with Dr. Mack's opinion on the K scale. What would that do? It would determine if somebody is not being truthful about their symptoms or they're exaggerating their symptoms?
Well, the MMPI assesses the individual's personality and their thoughts about themselves. So the question is how to get an accurate reading of the person's personality. If it is the case that they are having a deviation on the K scale, then you might not utilize the MMPI as a whole. But
So
the MMPI is not designed in a sense as a lie detector.
So what does that mean, sir, when you say if there's a manipulation of the K scale? What does that mean?
I don't think I used the word manipulation.
What word did you use?
I may have said deviation.
Okay. So if there's a deviation on the K scale, according to you, what does that mean?
It may come to a threshold that the MMPI is not usable, and
Because
the users cannot gather information about the individual's personality as a result.
Because they're lying, and it's not a reliable test, right? That's the ultimate consideration, right?
Right. So it's not saying that
Okay.
the person is lying. It's saying that the test is not reliable.
Because the person who's the subject of the test is not being, let's say, forthright. Is that fair?
I don't know that it's always necessarily a conscious act. An individual, it simply reflects the tendency the individual has when answering the questions that are on that subpart of the test.
Okay, so if somebody has been indicted by the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office for triple murder, and you are working for the DA, evaluating whether or not they are suffering from a mental disease or defect, would you agree with me, sir, that there may be a tendency for somebody to exaggerate their symptoms to try to paint a positive picture of themselves?
Overrule.
Not necessarily.
Well, how about a little bit necessarily?
I don't know that there's a relationship.
Okay. So you are aware, regardless, that when Lindsay took the test for Dr. Kirk Halbrun, that there was no indication whatsoever of any malingering, exaggeration, or anything along those lines in that test. Would you agree with that?
If you're talking about the MMPI, correct.
That's what we've been talking about. I don't know. We're looking at each other.
I wasn't sure if he was going to answer, but let's ask the next
Yeah,
question.
okay. So you, tell me again what your answer was, sir.
that effectively that's what the testing elicited, that her K scale effectively, it was a valid test.
Okay. Now, you, in your review of all of the records, Tufts, Gelada, McLean, you knew that one of the health care providers, which would be Gelada, was focusing on the possibility that Lindsay could have been suffering from bipolar 2. Is that right?
I am aware that that was on her mind, that was something she was concerned about, yes.
And bipolar 2 is quite common, is it not, sir, as a precursor of a person who is suffering from postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis, right?
I don't understand your question.
Okay, well, how about, is it appropriate in Dr. Mack's opinion to give a person suffering from bipolar 2 or bipolar 1 an SSRI?
An individual, there is a need in one's practice, traditionally at least, that if an individual might be suffering from bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, to avoid using SSRI medications. However, that has been reduced in terms of our worry about that over time, but that was maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something that psychiatrists were more concerned about, but the concern has lessened over time.
It has. So in your opinion, sir, it's okay to give a woman who is coming to you for help, who's been diagnosed with a bipolar 2, it's okay to give her the SSRI, in your opinion. Is that what you're telling this jury?
That's not what I said.
Oh, okay. Tell me what you said.
I said the concern about the relationship between SSRIs and mania or bipolar disorder has lessened, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people's practices have changed.
And when you say mania, what does that mean to you, sir?
Mania is a state defined in the DSM. I believe we discussed this the other day.
Well, go ahead. What is it? What are the symptoms of mania?
So mania is a condition, and it's defined not only by the symptoms that I'm going to mention, but also by a time frame. And as we discussed the other day, it is a mood state that is used as a building block for bipolar type 1. So one would need to see 7 days consecutive, and where the following symptoms, 4 at least of the following symptoms are present most of the day for all of these days. And that would include a thought process called flight of ideas. Secondly, distractibility. Thirdly, an engagement in activities that are pleasurable but have painful consequences. Rapid speech, or what we would call pressured speech.
Pressured speech.
Or rapid speech. Additionally, grandiosity and an exaggerated amount or excess degree of goal-directed behavior.
And what is your... go ahead.
Go ahead.
What is your understanding, sir, of the symptoms of bipolar 2?
So bipolar 2, well, we didn't finish the definition of bipolar 1, but in terms of bipolar type 2, one would need to have had a major depressive episode. I believe we discussed that the other day as well. And also one needs to have had what's called a hypomanic episode, which is similar to a manic episode, but lesser in terms of time course that's required, and only 3 out of the 7 symptoms are required.
So bipolar 2, you would agree with me, sir, is in fact a major or a serious mental illness, right?
Yes.
And your opinion, after you had your opportunity to go back again with Kirk on the third day and interview Lindsay in Tewksbury Hospital. And how long did you interview her for the third day, asking her questions?
I'm not sure I remember. It was perhaps 3 hours.
So after you completed your evaluation, you came to a conclusion that, in fact, Lindsay was suffering from a major mental disease or defect, to wit, bipolar 2. Is that correct?
No.
No. So why don't we look at your report and you tell me what your ultimate opinion was of your diagnosis of Lindsay after evaluating her, sir.
I think I said this the other day that my
Why don't you say it
opinion
again,
was
sir?
Yes, I'm happy to. My opinion was that, and is, that she suffered from a major depressive episode, and that was a part of major depressive disorder.
Well, looking at your report, sir, on your conclusions, would you agree with... Do you have your report?
He's reading from the wrong report.
Do you have your report,
Hi,
sir?
Counsel, can I see it sidebar just for a second?
It's not the wrong report. So, sir, you would agree that your opinion on page 35 is that at the time of the incident, that Lindsay Clancy was suffering from a mental disease, and then you have the opinion, however, she retained substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of her conduct. Is that correct? Did I read that right? And the mental disease from which she suffered, in your opinion, was a mood disorder, major depressive episode. Is that right?
Yes.
And you further opined that she may have also had an anxiety disorder that preceded or continued to be present while the major depressive episode proceeded through January 24th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware that she has been at Tewksbury under a particular diagnosis of a mental disease or defect, right?
Yes.
What is that?
I believe it's adjustment disorder.
Adjustment disorder. Is it not your understanding, sir, that she's suffering, according to diagnosis, bipolar disorder?
I think well, you'd have to show me where you're referring to.
So, did you have a chance to review Dr. Helbrin's report?
I did.
And do you know what Dr. Helbrin's opinion was of the diagnosis?
In terms of...
Diagnosis.
Yes.
What was it?
I think he made a diagnosis of bipolar type 2.
So you have nurse practitioner Gelada, who, as a treating practitioner, indicates that the diagnosis possibly is bipolar disorder, correct?
I don't know that she used those terms, but I know that she was concerned about the possibility.
And you know, because you've obviously read and incorporated into your report Dr. Resnick's opinion, correct?
Correct.
And what is Dr. Resnick's opinion, sir, to your understanding?
In terms of the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Bipolar type 2.
Okay. How about Dr. Zeizel? You also had access to and incorporated into his report, your report, his diagnosis. What was that?
Now, offhand, I don't remember what his diagnosis was.
How about Meg Spinelli? Did you have a chance to review her report and incorporate that into your report?
I reviewed her report.
Do you know what her diagnosis was, sir?
I believe it was bipolar type 1.
Right. So with all of the various healthcare providers that have an opinion of bipolar type 1, would you agree that that is a very strong indicator that a person could very well be suffering from postpartum depression?
I'm confused by your question because that last piece is not necessarily inconsistent with the diagnosis of major depressive episode.
I'm asking you, sir, about
your... What I discussed the other day was when that specifier is able to be used, that would be a diagnostic question.
So, with the understanding that nurse practitioner Gelada is bipolar, or looking at bipolar, that Zeizel report, you don't know or recall what it is, but you incorporated it into your report. Dr. Resnick is bipolar too. You feel that this is or is not indicative of a precursor to a person suffering from postpartum depression? It's in the books, in the articles, right?
Your use of terms, to me, seems apples and oranges. The question of postpartum depression would be, does the person have a mood disorder, and is it in the time frame following birth?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
So,
I can't, can you say that again, please?
we're talking about categories that are not aligned with each other.
No, I'm asking you what your answer was, okay?
Diagnosis.
What's your answer?
You'd have to restate the question.
Okay. You recall Friday, sir, that you were talking about onset of postpartum depression symptoms occurring within a particular time frame. Do you recall that, sir?
The diagnosis would be
My
a
question is
depressive
simple. Do you
episode.
recall saying what the time frame was Friday?
I'm trying to answer your question.
What is the time frame?
The time frame designated for the diagnostic specifier called with postpartum onset is 4 weeks.
Okay. And that's your opinion, right?
Well, I believe that's what the DSM says.
Okay. So let's talk about
the 4 week period. The 4 week period in which that specifier may be added.
Okay. You recall saying
The
that
diagnostic rule.
you recall saying that a person can be postpartum and it has to be within 4 weeks. Do you recall saying that Friday?
What I would have intended to say.
No.
Which I believe
What did you say to the? Come on. What did you say to the
All right,
jury
hold on,
last
hold on.
Friday?
Doctor, please listen to the question and just answer the question as asked, okay? And then if the Commonwealth has any redirect, they can follow up with their questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Do you recall saying that the person has to be postpartum within 4 weeks, according to the DSM? Recall saying that?
To meet that specifier, yes.
Right. Well, do you understand, sir, that every woman that has a baby for the rest of their life is postpartum? Because postpartum, quite frankly, means having a baby, right?
Sure.
So,
But that wouldn't be the specifier of with postpartum onset.
yeah, but you
in the
can't.
DSM.
Postpartum is not a disease, doctor. Postpartum.
Right. It's an appellation that is defined in terms of 4 weeks.
Okay. According to you, right? You understand that World Health Organization is different, right?
If you're talking about the ICD,
What is that time frame, sir?
I'm not sure what it is. I think you said it was 12 weeks.
How about the proposal to amend the DSM-5 text revision, or TR? What's the proposal for that?
Well, there's a proposal specifically around the proposed diagnosis called postpartum psychosis, and for that, it's a 6-week period.
So you've got 4 weeks, you got 6 weeks, you got 12 weeks. Would you agree, sir, that postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis can occur up to a year or even a year or longer?
I don't know, but I am telling you what the DSM says in terms of how to diagnose it and how to code it.
Okay. You would agree, sir, that she is at Tewksbury with a diagnosis of bipolar, right?
That may be among her diagnoses.
Okay. And she's on medication, right?
Yes.
And she hasn't had, over the past 3.5 years, any problems with sleep, anxiety, depression, symptomology of the same while she's been medicated at Tewksbury, right?
She has not demonstrated any signs of mania.
And she hasn't demonstrated any signs of anxiety either, has she, while she's been on the medication, the right medication, right?
I note that she's complaining of anxiety. I'm not sure she's demonstrating signs of anxiety.
Other than the fact that she's paralyzed and has to be in a wheelchair, she's not exhibiting the inability to bathe, the inability to emote, to have feelings, to talk to people. She's able to communicate with people, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what medications that she's on while she's at Tewksbury?
She's taking, I think we discussed this the other day, a low dose of Zyprexa, I believe clonidine and trazodone, and propranolol occasionally.
Okay. Now, after you had a chance to review the medical records from Dr. Tufts, which would be from end of September of 22 up through October of 22, for example, initial prescription, right?
I reviewed all the records from Dr. Tufts, yes.
And you recall what the first prescription was that she got, right?
Sertraline?
And that would be what, 25?
Yes,
Was that increased?
it was.
And was there an issue or a problem, according to Lindsay, when that was increased from 25 to 50?
Yes.
And what was the problem that she indicated to the doctor?
She wanted to sleep, but she was finding it hard to sleep.
She was unable to sleep for a period in excess of 48 hours, is what she said, right?
I think it was at that point, yes.
And also, she indicated that there was, in her opinion, a symptom that she didn't really have a need to sleep, even though she had gone 48 hours without sleeping, right?
No, she wanted to sleep.
Well, would you agree with me, sir?
She was tolerating, she described that she was tolerating during the daytime and functional sufficiently without the sleep, but she found that she was trying very hard to sleep and she couldn't sleep.
And do you recall her indicating that she did not feel, regardless of 48 hours straight without sleep, that she had a need? She said she didn't feel like she had a need to sleep. Did you see that in the records?
I'm not sure that it would be characterized that way.
Did you see? Okay. Did you see anything in the records?
Wanted to sleep.
All right, one at a time. Go ahead, Mr. Reddington.
Did you see anything in the records that indicated that she complained of the fact that she had gone 48 hours without sleeping after she was on the sertraline, and then felt that she did not need to sleep, even though she'd been without for 48 hours?
I don't exactly recall what was written by Dr. Tufts, but she described to me that in that period...
Doctor, I'm asking you about the medical records, not what you think she told you 3 years later. The medical records.
The medical records review the fact that she was not able to sleep.
And would you agree with me that one of the symptoms, sir, that you would be concerned about as a psychiatrist is when a woman who is postpartum, after having a baby, is complaining of a number of symptoms, one of which is that she went a long period of time unable to sleep, but didn't feel that she had the need to sleep? That's textbook, isn't it?
Well, the DSM textbook refers to a decreased need for sleep as the seventh element of mania.
Okay, so that is an indicia of mania. Can I get that out of you?
The way it's written is a decreased need for sleep.
Okay.
I don't know that she has a decreased need.
And in the medical...
Trying very hard.
Go ahead.
I think she desperately wanted to sleep.
Is that what you think, sir, or is that what your opinion is based on the medical records?
That is my understanding based on the totality of the information.
Okay. So is it your understanding that she also exhibited signs or symptoms of postpartum depression?
So to the extent that she had depression in a period after having had a baby, that is not how DSM would refer to it, but as you said, everybody would be postpartum in that regard. So my opinion is that she had major depressive episodes in this year or within 4 or 5 months following birth.
Sir, you're familiar with the postpartum psychosis. You're familiar with that, right?
So there's the concept of having psychosis.
Are you familiar with postpartum psychosis, sir? Yes or no?
I'm familiar with a proposed diagnostic entity called postpartum psychosis and the idea that people can have psychosis as a mental disorder at other times.
You're familiar with the Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
You're familiar with the funding of the Department of Mental Health for the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Product. You're familiar with that, right?
No.
Called the MCPAP, that focuses on postpartum psychosis and postpartum depression. Are you familiar with that, sir?
No.
Would you agree with me that when a person has a child and is within the postpartum period, that they may present to a doctor with symptoms that might lead the doctor to believe that they are suffering from postpartum depression? Would you agree with that?
I'm not familiar with that particular program. I'm happy to.
All right, I know you're happy, but I'm just asking, sir, about postpartum depression. Forget the program. You're not familiar with the program. We get it. I'm asking you now, sir, about your familiarity with postpartum depression.
Yes.
Okay. And there are symptoms of postpartum depression. Fair to say?
Postpartum depression.
Are there symptoms, sir? Yes.
I am familiar.
Okay. And forget the DSM. Let's just focus on the symptoms as you understand it for postpartum depression, which, according to you, has to occur within the first 4 weeks of birth. But quite frankly, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 12 weeks, it could be a year, right?
You said forget the DSM, except that making diagnoses in psychiatry requires an authority, and we utilize, in this country, the DSM.
Maybe we shouldn't?
So,
All right, sustained. Next question.
So you're familiar, sir, you're not familiar with MCPAP for mothers in Massachusetts. You're not familiar with that subsidiary of the Department of Mental Health, right?
no.
Are you familiar with the Department of Mental Health postpartum psychosis provider training? In other words, what the LISCWs are learning and what the psychologists or psychiatrists working for the DMH are learning about postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. Are you familiar with those standards?
No.
How about the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale? We talked about that Friday. You're familiar with that, sir?
I am.
But you don't feel it's important. You think the regular GAD scale, general anxiety scale, is sufficient, I guess, right?
I don't think I said that.
Oh, okay. So do you think that the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale is important as a tool for a diagnosing physician dealing with a woman that's within the time frame and exhibiting symptoms of postpartum depression?
Yes.
Okay. So what was Lindsay's scale, if you know now? You had the weekend, I imagine, to look it up.
I don't offhand know what it was.
Okay. So if I offhand told you that it was pretty much off the chart, would that have any impact on your opinion as to the utility of the postnatal depression scale that was administered to her?
objection to the form of the question.
No, sustained. I mean, overruled. Let me ask. Sorry.
It's a scale that elicits distress, which she had, and it elicits depression, which she had.
And it's not just limited to distress and depression. It's focused on, and again, I'll read it, the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, right?
Right.
So, no, the answer's right.
She had diagnosis of depression. She was being treated for depression.
All right. So you, in any event, you don't utilize, apparently, the EPDS, right? You don't utilize it in your practice, whatever that may be.
Correct.
Okay.
Not that I'm against it. I just haven't had the opportunity to use it in some time.
Right. Just like you think that, an episiotomy is a tear, I guess, when a person has a baby, right?
I'm sorry?
Remember Friday you said that when a baby is born and the woman suffers a tear, that you called it a particular name?
An episiotomy.
Right.
When there's a need for repair for a tear, there are several different degrees.
No, wait a minute. Hold on now. Hold on. Excuse me, sir. Friday you said that the episiotomy is, in fact, a tear. Do you remember saying that?
I'm not sure exactly the wording.
Did somebody tell you that you were way off base on that testimony Friday, sir?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I'm referring to you saying that an episiotomy is a tear. And it's not.
Your Honor, is there a question before the witness?
I already asked the question. I'm looking at him staring back at me.
All right. Why don't you
The last.
just hold on? Well, you can rephrase that.
Do you remember saying Friday that episiotomy is a tear? Do you remember saying that to this jury, sir?
I don't remember the exact words that I stated.
Okay. Did anybody over the weekend tell you that in fact you were wrong and that it is a surgical procedure and that a natural tear has nothing to do with that procedure other than repairing? Did anybody talk to you about that at all over the weekend?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you would agree with me, at least, that postpartum depression, even though you don't use the EPDS, does have symptoms that a doctor would consider if a patient came to him or her for help, right? Yes or no?
So,
yes or no?
You're asking me about a condition which
Right.
is not the way that it's defined.
I'm asking you, sir, whether or not you understand as a doctor that if a woman has a baby and comes to you because she is in trouble, that you would look for symptoms, would you not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if the woman told you that she was less able to laugh, no emotion, unable to see the funny side, is that a symptom, sir, in your opinion, of postpartum depression? Yes or no?
It's a symptom of depression.
Was Lindsay Clancy complaining that she was unable to laugh or emote or see the funny side, if you will, of life when she went to see Dr. Tufts and Dr. Gelada? Do you recall that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's just say the next issue would be stopped looking forward to things. You're familiar with that? People don't look forward to things, and what is that called? Anhedonia or something like that?
Right. So that was one of the several elements of major depressive episode that I referred to the other day.
Right. But it's also one of the symptoms of postpartum depression, correct?
They are the same. When
Okay.
you have depression and you meet the qualifier, then you can call it depression with postpartum onset.
How about a person that comes to you and says that they're anxious and worried constantly for no good reason? Would you agree, sir, yes or no, that that's a symptom of postpartum depression, according to the authorities?
So,
can you answer that yes or no, sir? It's real easy. Sir.
All right, hold on. If you can't answer the question as asked, doctor, just say you can't answer it as asked, and I'll ask counsel to rephrase it. Go ahead.
Yes.
So would you agree with me, sir, that the next symptom of postpartum depression would be anxious or worried for no good reason?
So I can't answer that question.
You can't. You can't?
I said I can't.
Okay. Was Lindsay Clancy expressing to the doctors and the nurse practitioners and the LICSWs or whatever on the medical records that she was anxious and worried on a daily basis for no apparent reason?
Yes.
Did Lindsay Clancy also indicate that she would have episodes of fear or panic for no good reason?
Yes.
Did she also indicate, sir, that she was overwhelmed by life, basically, overwhelmed?
Yes.
Did she also indicate that she was so unhappy and worried and anxious that she had trouble sleeping?
Yes.
Did she indicate that she was sad or miserable and unable to enjoy things like family, friends, society?
That is a symptom that progressed as those months moved on, yes.
Sure did. Did she also say that she's unhappy? She was so unhappy that she was crying on a daily basis.
Yes.
Did she also indicate that she had thoughts of harming herself?
Well, or suiciding, yes.
So if she's successful in harming herself and she dies, then it's suicide. Either way, it's a thought of harming herself, right?
I don't think she had the interest of harming herself simply for the interest of harming herself. She had the interest of suiciding.
And she wasn't successful, obviously, right?
Are you referring to January 24th?
So the postpartum depression, sir, which invariably involves the EPDS, which you don't use, consists of 1 to 10 symptoms, and she hits every one in the medical records that you reviewed. Is that correct?
First of all, I'm not sure what you're... Well, I can't answer the question as you asked. I'll put it...
Let's talk about postpartum psychosis, because that is something that can follow postpartum depression. Is that right?
You're using terms that make it that I can't answer your question.
Postpartum psychosis, you can't answer? You know what that is, don't you?
Are you referring to the proposed diagnosis that we referred to earlier? The one
I'm referring to the fact that this young lady was suffering from postpartum psychosis when she killed her kids. Do you know what postpartum psychosis means?
So there is a observation that a person may have psychosis, or there is the proposed diagnosis that we referred to the other day.
Let's do this. Symptoms of postpartum psychosis. Number 1, hearing voices. Would you agree, sir, that hearing voices is indicative of having a symptom of postpartum psychosis?
You're referring to a condition or an illness called postpartum psychosis, and I don't know that I can answer questions as a psychiatrist based on that.
Would you agree, sir, that when a person is suffering from postpartum psychosis, you understand that term, do you not?
When we elicit...
Do you understand the term postpartum psychosis? It's real easy. Do you understand that term?
It's actually not easy. It's serious, but when we do elicit psychosis after a birth, we take it very seriously. Typically...
Who's we? Who's we? We take it seriously.
No,
Who's we?
We psychiatrists, I as a psychiatrist.
Yeah. So would you agree with me, sir, that when you are diagnosing, if you do, a patient that's coming to you for help after having a baby, so it's postpartum, and has been through, let's say, postpartum depression, and is now complaining of hearing voices or a voice commanding her to act, that is a symptom of postpartum psychosis, yes or no? Is it?
That would be psychosis. I don't know exactly, based on your hypothetical, as to whether it would count as the proposed postpartum psychosis illness, disease, but it certainly would be a concerning symptom or sign.
Okay, so if you had administered the Edinburgh test, that is something that may have assisted you in evaluating the claim that the person is hearing voices? Because that's one of the things that you would be concerned about with a patient, right?
You're always concerned if you're encountering somebody who's hearing voices, especially if they're new.
Especially if they're a mother, right?
Anybody.
How about thought broadcasting? You ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. How about a patient that says that they're worried about hearing voices and they're worried that people such as teachers could hear the voices in their head? Is that something that would concern you?
Yes.
How about if the person was afraid that somebody is able to hear the voices in their head and would call the police or DCF and they'd lose their kids? Is that something that would concern you?
Hypothetically, yes, it would be a concern.
How about actually in this case with Lindsay Clancy? Did you come across that in all of your investigation?
I came across, in my evaluation, a period where she worried that people could hear what she was thinking. That's different, first of all, from thought broadcasting. But in either event, as I've said, she was in a serious psychiatric state, and she was suffering.
How about number 2, postpartum psychosis symptomology, delusional beliefs with distorted reality? Did she complain to Tufts or Gelada about having distorted reality being disassociated? Things weren't real. Do you recall coming across that?
So there were times that in the context of some of the medications she was taking that she felt that things weren't real, yes.
Okay, so
Or that
my
she felt,
question, sir,
uncomfortable.
my question, sir, is whether or not she complained of that to her health care providers. You'd agree with me
Yes.
that she did, right?
Yes.
Okay. How about appears normal in between episodes, calm, even laughing? Would you agree with me, sir, that postpartum psychosis waxes and wanes? It comes and it goes, right?
So are you referring to a particular...
I'm asking you a simple question. Do you
quote?
agree that postpartum psychosis waxes and wanes, that it can come out of nowhere and then leave, and a person can appear normal? They can even laugh. Would you agree with that, sir?
Are you referring to postpartum psychosis and illness, or the findings of psychosis in somebody who's postpartum?
I'm asking you about Lindsay Clancy, the young lady that's sitting right here that you're testifying against in front of this jury, telling this jury that she was responsible for the death of her children. You with me?
I'm not sure I understand exactly the context that you just stated.
Okay,
But
the
if your
context I'm giving it
question
is...
the natural course of an illness called postpartum psychosis. That illness has not been refined. It's not something that we in psychiatry, at least as far as I'm aware, can talk about as an illness where we understand its typical course and we understand...
Time out.
All right, hold on. Let him finish. Doctor, you done with that answer?
I'm done.
Okay, go ahead.
You're telling me, sir, that you don't believe or buy postpartum psychosis. Is that what you're telling me?
I didn't say that at all.
Okay. So you do believe that postpartum psychosis is a serious mental illness?
I don't think it's a matter of belief or not belief. I'm aware of how to elicit the symptom or sign of psychosis. I am also aware that there's a proposal for an illness that would be recognized where we understand its typical course and how it progresses, that has been proposed and that has not been approved for use in psychiatry in the United States.
Approved by who?
By the American Psychiatric Association.
The APA, so you...
Hold on.
By the team that let me, if I can finish, by
That's
the
the judge you're
particular
talking to, not
body
me.
within the American Psychiatric.
Do you agree that postpartum psychosis is a legitimate disease or defect? Yes or no?
when you have a symptom or sign of postpartum of psychosis at any time, but particularly in the postpartum period, it is a legitimate finding and something to be concerned about and to treat.
Okay. And when you say within the time frame, you're referring to the Dr. Mack time frame of 4 weeks, right?
No, I think, as I said, any time that a person has psychosis.
Okay, so
the issue about 4 weeks has to do with how we would diagnose it or what wording we would use to diagnose it, but that doesn't have to do with the reality of the individual.
Okay, so any time that there is a psychosis, and if it's postpartum, you would agree that you can put the two words together and it's postpartum psychosis, right?
You would not utilize that in your diagnostic terminology.
Okay. Well, you would agree,
You
sir,
would see it, and you would be concerned about it. According to the DSM, you would not utilize that.
I'm sorry. Doctor, if you could repeat that answer. We had some problems following it. Go ahead.
So the presence of psychosis is always of concern, especially if it's new onset. To the extent that we are talking about the proper terminology of labeling something, whether it is postpartum onset or not, the DSM provides guidance as to the time frame. That is different than my saying that it is a not serious condition.
So, symptom number one, complaint, according to the Mass General Hospital, major research project, along with the Department of Mental Health, dealing with postpartum psychosis, would indicate that hearing voices, a voice commanding her to act, is a symptom of postpartum psychosis. Do you agree with that? Yes or no? Just give me a yes or no.
I can't answer that.
Okay, the answer is no. The answer is no.
All right. He just doesn't agree with it. Next question.
You answered these questions several times now.
Really?
Overruled. We're going to let him ask that question if you want to ask that again.
So let's move on, sir, so we don't fight over number one. How about number two? Delusional beliefs, distorted reality. Would you agree that that's a symptom of postpartum psychosis, sir? Yes or no?
You said number one, number two. I don't know what authority you're referring to.
Do you agree, sir, that a symptom of postpartum psychosis, in addition to the hearing of the voices, would be delusional beliefs and a distorted reality?
I can't answer because I still don't know if you're referring to the phenomenon of psychosis or you're referring to some illness.
I'm referring to the illness that Lindsay Clancy was suffering that's in her medical record, sir, that you tell this jury you read. That's all I'm asking.
Well, I didn't find any evidence of psychosis in her record.
Okay.
Other than...
Was there any was there any indication that she was hearing voices? Did she complain about that, sir? Yes or no?
She complained about intrusive thoughts.
Okay.
If that's where you're...
How about the delusional beliefs and distorted reality? Do you recall her complaining about distorted reality, sir? Yes or no?
I'm not sure she used those terms. If you're referring
No,
to...
never mind what I'm referring to. Your answer is no, right?
No, she did not display psychotic features.
I didn't ask about psychotic features. I'm asking you about delusional beliefs and distorted reality, doctor.
That is a type of psychosis.
Okay.
So I didn't see any evidence of any psychotic features throughout the medical records.
So it's your understanding from reviewing her medical records that Lindsay never indicated that she was not participating in reality, that she was in a disassociated state, that she was out of touch with reality. You're telling this jury you never saw that?
I did see that evidence, that component that you discussed with your physician.
Great.
I don't see that as a sign, strictly speaking, of psychosis. It may have been in some cases, but I don't see any signs of psychosis or delusions.
Like in this postpartum psychosis, sir, you'd agree that delusional beliefs, distorted reality is a symptom, yes or no? Not waxing and waning with your answer, yes or no?
Are you referring to an authority there?
Doctor,
I agree.
Doctor, hold on. Here's the way this works, all right? You don't really ask a lot of questions. You answer the questions, all right? If I told you before, if you can't answer a question the way it's framed, just let me know, and I'll tell counsel to frame it in a different way. All right? So
Okay,
that's the rules. That's how it works here. So go ahead, Mr. Reddington.
Thank you. Would you agree, sir, that a symptom of postpartum psychosis with a woman who is coming to a physician for treatment indicates that they appear to have normal periods between episodes of dissociation where they're calm, they're even laughing, and they can drive cars, they can talk to people, they can use telephones, all of that, right?
It would be that description may be of other things, but it's not necessarily of psychosis.
How about severe sleep deprivation, sir? Do you agree that severe sleep deprivation is a symptom when you're considering the whole of the patient complaining of various symptoms? Severe sleep deprivation is a symptom of postpartum psychosis.
I can't answer the question the way you phrased it.
Okay, so let's say postpartum psychosis, you're somewhat familiar with it, and would you agree that severe sleep deprivation is a symptom of it?
I can't answer the question the way
Okay,
you
you
phrased
can't answer it, okay. How about rapid mood swings? Would you agree that rapid mood swings are a symptom of postpartum psychosis, sir?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. How about a person saying that they're not herself? I want to be myself. I want to go back to being myself. I can't be myself. Is that a complaint that is a symptom of postpartum psychosis, sir?
It might be, if the person has psychosis.
Okay, the answer is it might be. Did Lindsay Clancy indicate that she wanted to go back to being herself?
Yes.
Now, did she also, was there any evidence, sir, of thoughts of harming her children?
There were periods when she had impulses or intrusive thoughts about harming her children.
And when you say intrusive, if I come to you and if a person comes to you and postpartum psychosis is on your radar and says that they're having intrusive thoughts about harming their children, would you not ask them what that means? In other words, is it a voice in their head? Is it their thought process? What is it? Do you ask that question?
Of course.
Did anybody ask that question when she was complaining about having intrusive thoughts about suicide, for example? Did anybody ask her what that meant? Voices in the head or thoughts?
I believe that the clinicians at McLean, at Mass General, Dr. Gelada, Dr. Tufts all asked about or all made inquiries to understand the nature of her suicidal ideation.
Do you believe that based on your review of the medical records and based on your review of the numerous cocktail of drugs that were prescribed to her that she received good medical care from Gelada and Tufts?
No, ruled.
I don't have an opinion on that.
Did she complain that she was not herself and her family could see the change?
Yes.
Okay. Did she also complain of thoughts of suicide?
Yes.
Did she also have poor insight?
I'm not sure that she had poor insight.
Well, if you are looking at postpartum psychosis and the symptoms are 1 through 10, if a person is complaining to you as a doctor, and when I say complain, I don't mean complaining, I mean that's medical language, that they're complaining or giving you a symptom, of 1 through 9, that is a very, very strong indicia that the person is suffering from postpartum psychosis, is it not?
1 through 9. I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Okay. How about blood tests? You think they're important when you're dealing with prescribing medications like Tufts was after a month?
They can be.
And do you think, sir, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that a person should be given a basic blood test when you're prescribing these medications to them?
No, overruled.
There are some situations where blood tests are required or needed, and other times when psychiatrists may feel comfortable making prescriptions without such tests.
So there is a further test that can be given that would actually determine whether or not a person's enzymes are reacting to the drugs, the narcotics that are being prescribed to them. Isn't that right?
You say narcotics?
Well, drugs,
sure.
like sertraline or...
Can you say the question again?
Sure. Prescriptions. When a person is prescribed prescriptions, it is well within reason that a competent physician would, number one, take a simple blood test, right?
It's possible.
Okay. And I guess that's up to the doctor that you're seeing, right?
Well, sure, or depends on what concerns the person may have, what's their medical history, what's your awareness of other factors that are affecting their biological health.
So let's take Lindsay Clancy.
Depends on which medication we're talking about also.
Let's take Lindsay Clancy, for example, sir. The medical records that you reviewed when she's dealing with Tufts and Gelada, did they administer any blood test to her at all?
Not that I recall.
Is there a further analysis that can be performed on the blood that is drawn from the woman when she sees the doctor to determine whether or not there are enzyme reactions to the prescription drugs that they're prescribed?
There are tests that can be done to determine the relative degree of one enzyme or another and how much they would do in terms of breaking down the medications, if that's what you're talking about.
Well, that test wasn't administered to Lindsay, was it?
I don't think so.
In spite of numerous, innumerable, which we won't have to go through, complaints that she had and her husband about what was happening to her as a result of her postpartum as well as postpartum depression, symptomology of postpartum psychosis in conjunction with the narcotics, the drugs, the prescriptions that she was given. They never did any further testing, right?
Correct.
How about thyroid? Is that something that's important to you as a doctor dealing with a postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis?
Thyroid would be important to assess in a person complaining of mood problems, yes.
Well, how about a woman who is complaining that during the postpartum, which goes on ad infinitum, is complaining of postpartum depression symptoms and or postpartum psychosis? It's important to check their thyroid level, isn't it?
It would be important to check thyroid in multiple different psychiatric conditions.
So the answer is yes, right? The answer is yes.
Well, I'm not sure that specifically answers your question.
I don't care. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Okay. Commonwealth redirect?
Good morning, Dr. Mack. Now, defense counsel kept referring to your investigation in this case. Do you see your role as an investigator when you're retained to do these evaluations?
No.
And in fact, you are evaluating for a specific question, correct?
That's correct.
And in your evaluation in this case, you were asked to focus on the mental condition of Lindsay Clancy at the time of January 24, 2023, right?
So, excuse me, he's able to answer yes or no, but this is direct, so I'm objecting to the leading.
I'm going to allow just to kind of focus to the area, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you. You can answer that question.
Yes.
Now, were you provided the information that you reviewed?
Yes.
And were you aware where that came from, whether it was the court or the district attorney's office or from defense?
I am not necessarily aware of the origin of any of the documents that I reviewed, only that I did review them and I did possess them.
And as far as the timing of when you were retained in this case, I believe your testimony on Friday was that your memory was early 2025 you were retained. Is that right?
Yes, I would say that the initial discussion about it was at the end of 2024. I am not exactly sure when the Commonwealth or the District Attorney's Office exactly made the retention happen, but I understand it to be early 2025.
And you were provided a significant amount of information after you were retained, correct?
Yes.
And that information continued to come to you up until the point that you were going to meet with the defendant in April of 2026. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And were you able to set up that interview with her on your own?
No.
Is it your understanding that it had to be with the permission of the court and the parties?
That's my understanding.
And that date in April was a date that was provided to you as a date that you could go and speak with her, correct?
Yes, the 2 dates, April 10th and April 12th.
And in conducting these evaluations, is it standard or best practice to review as much information as you can prior to that interview?
That's correct.
And you were provided records from the Tewksbury State Hospital in the weeks prior to your interview. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Now, when you're retained on cases, this case and any other, you're paid for your time and your work regardless of what your ultimate opinion is, correct?
That's right.
Can you explain to us the relationship that you have with Park Dietz and Associates?
Yes. There are times that attorneys around the country go to Park Dietz and Associates seeking or asking if they have an expert in a particular field, and Park Dietz and Associates may be able to propose one expert or another who might be able to help that attorney or law firm.
And so in your relationship with that company, you are simply an independent contractor, or are you employed by the company?
Independent contractor.
And fair to say, there's not kind of a group email that somebody can send out asking for experts on all these types of areas in which you testify, right?
No, the Park Dietz and Associates would go to individual experts that they think might be appropriate for one or another case given the topic.
Now, you were asked some questions about Dr. Halbrin, and I think last week on Friday you indicated that you didn't know him prior to working on this case. Is that correct?
Correct. I had never met him.
And so is he a name that was familiar to you in your area of general psychiatry?
I knew that he was another expert that works with the Park Dietz and Associates group, but I had never met him.
And in fact, he's not a general psychiatrist, is he?
I believe he's a psychologist.
Okay. And so your focus is different than his focus, correct?
To some degree, yes.
Now, how did it come about that you and Dr. Halbrin ended up going to Tewksbury at the same time?
Well, my memory is that to the extent that he also had been retained, that there was a need to that there was only going to be one opportunity for an examination by the prosecution. And so rather than create two different sets of interviews for Ms. Clancy, it was better to overlap them and have them happen concurrently.
And in relation to the purpose of the interview with the person being evaluated, the defendant here, Was there anything different about your approach and his approach as far as the information you were seeking to gather?
Generally, no. As has been mentioned, he went ahead and did psychological testing on the second day. But other than that, it's still the same topic, the individual's mental health.
And in regards to that particular, those days that you were there, it wasn't just you and Dr. Halburn in the room with the defendant, correct?
That's right.
Who else was in the room?
One person who served as a videographer, well, two individuals who served as videographers.
Do you know who retained the videographer?
I don't.
And you're aware that Ms. Clancy was also on a one-to-one. So was there a staff member from Tewksbury close by, if not in the room?
Close by, but not in the room.
And the person who was conducting the video, they were in the room running the video the whole time?
That's correct.
And fair to say, as it pertained to taking breaks, you and Dr. Halburn offered the defendant multiple opportunities to take a break, correct?
Yes.
And
we made it clear that we could take a break anytime.
And she repeatedly declined a break, right?
I recall that, yes.
Okay. And that would be contained within the video that was running throughout the course of your interaction with her, correct?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to present as the next exhibit the recorded interview with the experts.
All right, I see counsel at sidebar. That'll be exhibit, yes.
Exhibit 292.
Okay, no objection?
No.
Dr. Mack, on cross-examination, you were asked about the LeBron case that you were involved in. You recall that line of questioning?
I do.
And in that case, you were retained by the state of Florida. Is that right?
Yes, the executive office of the governor.
And you offered an opinion in that case, correct?
Yes.
And was that testimony or by way of a declaration or a report?
It was a report, and then there was a deposition.
And so you were part of a hearing with the court in Florida to determine whether your ultimate opinions could be considered in the case, correct?
I don't think that there was a specific separate hearing as to that point.
Okay.
My recollection is that in the phase of a summary judgment proceeding, that the use of my testimony was discussed in the summary judgment documents from each side.
And then ultimately, your opinion wasn't utilized by the court, right?
If I recall the statement of the court in the document, it was that Dr. Mack is not an expert in this case, or it may have said Dr. Mack is not a qualified expert in this case.
And why was that?
My recollection of the case, which is now almost 15 years ago, was that the information that I was aware of in terms of the rate of substance use in individuals who received TANF was nationwide and was not specific to Florida.
And the issue was a Florida TANF case, right? Having to do with residents in the state of Florida. So as far as the limitations there and your testimony in these types of cases could be nationwide. In that particular case, it was just that you didn't have enough information about the residents in that state, correct?
Well, that was
Okay, if you can answer that, and then go ahead.
my understanding is that that was one of the elements by which the court determined or made the statement that it did.
Okay. And you were offering some opinions about your expertise in the area of addiction during that time period, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Had nothing to do with criminal responsibility.
Correct.
Now, you talked a lot with defense counsel about the DSM, so I don't want to go too far into it, but on Friday, you directed Attorney Reddington to a particular part of the bipolar and related disorder chapter having to do with specifiers. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you directed him to page 173, which referred to the specifier with peripartum onset. Can you just explain to us first what is a specifier when we're talking about the DSM?
Specifiers are a way in which the DSM allows a diagnostician to highlight certain details of the individual's presentation. But as I was mentioning the other day, psychiatric classification nowadays refers to the larger presenting symptoms that the individual has, and specifiers can be added on. So a person can have a severe mood disorder, and then one can add on the specifier of with postpartum onset or atypical features or other specifiers that have been defined.
And so when you were referring to page 173, where it starts the long paragraph about with peripartum onset, is that the portion of the specifier categories for bipolar-related disorders where we're talking about postpartum periods?
Yes, there is a defined way in which a person can add as a diagnosis whether or not there was onset in that particular time frame.
And that's where we find the four-week timeline, correct?
Correct.
And it also talks about different mood episodes, including manic and depressive episodes in that section, right?
That's right.
And that section also talks about the fact that it could present, mood episodes could present with psychotic symptoms and without psychotic symptoms, or psychotic features, I should say. Is that right?
Right. Bipolar disorder is a disorder of mood. Abnormal mood is what the diagnostician observes and is aware of. And if there is a way to determine that it's a major depressive episode or a manic episode or a hypomanic episode, that will help to determine if this severe mood condition is bipolar or major depressive disorder.
And so in that regard, the same specifier is also part of the major depressive category, correct? As
right.
a specifier.
As I said, the specifiers provide detail, but they are not the, so to speak, the major element of the diagnosis. The major element of the diagnoses in DSM are the observable major symptoms and signs.
Well, I'm asking about just what's contained within those specifiers, because you and counsel went back and forth quite a bit on Friday about what's in there and what's not in the DSM when it comes to the peripartum onset. But as far as in both the specifier for bipolar and depressive disorder, there are a number of those features that you were discussing that is in the DSM as a specifier.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those are presentation with psychotic features, the frequency of occurrence or reoccurrence of the peripartum onset for these disorders, right? That's
yes,
in there.
the description has that, yes.
As well as the risk of postpartum episodes being greater when people have history of depressive disorders or bipolar disorder. That's within that specifier for each of those two chapters, is it not?
Yes, that portion of the specifier is a description of what's been observed over time. It's not necessarily the criteria, but it's the observations that have been so commonly observed that they were able to write that in the manual.
So this concept of a peripartum onset, or we've been using it as postpartum interchangeably, it's within the DSM-5, right?
Yes, the DSM-5 provides a manner by which to make a diagnosis that provides this specification or that highlights this detail of the individual's illness.
And as far as your conclusions, again, when you're asked to do an evaluation, do you rely on other people's conclusions about diagnosis when making your own diagnosis?
It's important to understand what others have observed and what they're concerned about. And then as a physician, one will make one's own diagnosis.
And so in this case, you came to the conclusion that the defendant presented with a major depressive episode, right?
Correct.
And you relied on diagnostic criteria in the major depressive disorder category. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that was the diagnostic criteria that I used to support that diagnosis.
And counsel went through with you today a number of different, I think he called them symptoms of postpartum depression. But as far as major depressive disorder, what are the 9 general symptoms that you see, or you can find 5 or more of, to find that somebody suffers from a major depressive disorder?
So a major depressive episode is defined, and this is parallel to the description I was giving earlier of a manic episode. They're both problems of mood. They're both discrete periods of mood problems. So a major depressive episode would be a 2-week discrete change in a person's mood, and you have to have at least 5 of 9 different symptoms or signs, and it has to be persistent, and it has to be most of the days. So the 9 include starting out with anhedonia, meaning lack of feeling pleasure. Secondly, actually feeling depressed mood. It can be feelings of guilt or worthlessness. And then it also may include problems with thinking about death or suicidality. Furthermore, problems with sleep, eating, what we call energy, psychomotor activity, either psychomotor slowing or agitation. And then all these, you have to have 5 out of these 9
Right.
In order to meet the major depressive episode.
And I think maybe you might have missed one, diminished ability to think or concentrate. Is that one?
Concentration.
Concentration.
So
a lot of the symptoms that counsel read to you are symptoms that are in the category of a major depressive disorder. Is that correct?
yes, this is the method of making the diagnosis of a major depressive episode.
So when you were asked on cross-examination about postpartum depression, and you kept answering that you found her to have a depressive disorder, are those the symptoms that you were speaking of when you were saying you found a major depressive disorder?
Can I object?
Overruled.
Bleeding?
Correct.
No, overruled. I'll allow it.
I have nothing further.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Just briefly, sir, are you suggesting that my office had any control over when you were able to go visit Lindsay in the hospital?
Objection.
No, overruled.
I don't know if your office was involved, but I imagine, so I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I imagine your office was aware,
Thank you.
but I don't know if you had control.
Doctor, I think you've answered the question. All right. Next. Anything further?
Thank you, Judge.
Anything further, Como? All right. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So, members of the jury, we're going to take the morning break at this point, and we're going to come back and continue with the Commonwealth's rebuttal case. We'll have a witness who will go on the stand after we get back. All right. So we'll take the break at this time. Thank you.
Court, all rise. Jury, sign for the notebook. Please come to chairs, please.
Jurors have exited the courtroom.
All right. Anything we need to discuss before the break, Commonwealth?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so we'll be in the morning recess at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
This court is back in session. You may be seated.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, excluding the jury.
All right. Attorney Sprague, we ready for the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Court, all rise. Jurors entering. This court's now in session. Please be seated.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including the defendant and including the 18 jurors.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Attorney Sprague, you call your next witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth calls Dr. Kirk Halbern.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You start right here. Raise your right hand for the clerk, please.
Good morning. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony in the evidence you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you, sir. You may have a seat.
Watch your step, please.
All right. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, sir.
All right. I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up so the jury can hear you. And with that, Attorney Sprague.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes. My name is Kirk Heilbrun. That's spelled K-I-R-K, and then H-E-I-L-B-R-U-N.
What is your occupation?
I'm a psychologist. I am in the Department of Psychology at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And as part of that, I run two clinics. One is a clinic where I conduct psychological evaluations for, thanks, sir, for courts and attorneys, and the other is what we call the Reentry Project, where we provide assessment and treatment services to individuals who are either returning from federal prison or under the jurisdiction of a federal mental health court or have been exonerated following a false conviction.
And do you specialize in certain areas of psychology?
Yes, I do. I'm a forensic psychologist, and that means that I take the application of clinical psychology and I apply it to legal proceedings in criminal and civil matters.
Can you describe your training in clinical psychology?
Yes, I can. I received a doctoral degree from the University of Texas at Austin in 1980. And as part of that, I received training in various sorts of assessment and treatment and therapy and research and things like that. And then also as part of that, I was involved in a full-time internship between 1979 and 1980 at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio.
And did you receive specialized postgraduate training in forensic psychology?
I did. I received from 1981 to 1982, I did a postdoctoral fellowship in the applications of psychology to crime and criminal justice.
And what did that involve?
That involved full-time exposure to clinical work in correctional and forensic populations, and also a thorough exposure to the clinical and research literature on assessment and interventions with these individuals.
And are you licensed to practice psychology?
I am licensed in the state of Pennsylvania, and I'm also part of something called PsyPact, which allows people licensed in one state to practice on a temporary basis in another state.
And are you board certified in clinical psychology?
I'm board certified with the American Board of Professional Psychology, which is the oldest and most rigorous kind of board certification agency organization in the country.
And are you board certified in forensic psychology?
Yes, I'm also board certified in forensic psychology with the American Board of Professional Psychology.
And do you have experience in the treatment of individuals found either incompetent to stand trial or not guilty due to lack of criminal responsibility?
I do. Between 1982 and 1991, I was first a staff psychologist, then a chief psychologist at the Florida State Hospital in Chattahoochee, Florida. And then between 1991 and 1994, I served as the clinical director of the forensic unit at Central State Hospital in Petersburg, Virginia. And at that time, I was also serving as an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond. And as a part of these positions, I had responsibilities for providing assessment and treatment services myself, and also for supervising such services provided by others.
And could you describe your job responsibilities at Drexel University?
I could. I teach graduate and undergraduate courses in forensic assessment and law and psychology. And as part of the clinic that I mentioned a moment ago, I conduct forensic evaluations at the request of judges and attorneys, and I supervise individuals who are providing services to the individuals who are either coming back to the community from prison or under the jurisdiction of a federal mental health court, or who are leaving prison having been exonerated following a false conviction. And finally, I conduct research and supervise students who are working in psychology and law areas.
And have you conducted research in the areas of abnormal behavior and criminality?
I have. Over the course of my career, I've published about 240 articles, chapters, and books in the areas of aggression and violence, juveniles, mentally disordered adult offenders, forensic assessment, ethics, and malingering and deception. And two of those interests that are particularly applicable to the present case are risk assessment, which helps us understand the influences contributing to violent behavior, and also forensic mental health assessment, where we consider the important principles and steps that are connected with psychological and psychiatric evaluations in legal contexts such as criminal or civil proceedings.
And are you involved in providing continuing education to mental health and legal professionals?
Yes, over the past 15 years, I've presented about 50 lectures and workshops in the areas of forensic assessment, risk assessment, treatment, sexual offenders, and ethics.
And Doctor, in your experience in doing forensic evaluations and in teaching people how to do forensic evaluations, would you call someone you're doing a forensic evaluation on your patient?
No, I would call them perhaps someone who's being evaluated or an evaluee or something like that. They're not a patient because the role of therapist in treating a patient is different from the role of a psychologist or psychiatrist in conducting a forensic mental health assessment. They're different in a number of different ways, but basically what we try to do as a forensic evaluator is we try our best to conduct a thorough evaluation in which we are out there and trying our best to be accurate and just come up with something that is as true and accurate as we can possibly make it in terms of evaluating the questions that were asked. When we're working as a therapist, basically we're working to help somebody improve in their in various kinds of difficulties that they're having in life, symptoms, problems, and that sort of thing. And the two can conflict sometimes because as a therapist, I just want to do my best to help somebody. As a forensic evaluator, I want to do my best to be as accurate and open and thorough as possible, even if it doesn't necessarily help someone.
And seeing as you've treated patients and you've conducted forensic evaluations, would you conduct a forensic evaluation on one of your patients if requested?
I would not, no. If I were asked to do that, I would explain that those are two different roles, that there is very likely a conflict of interest that could arise if I try to do both, and I would refer whoever requested it to another individual to conduct the evaluation.
And have you testified in cases as a witness on issues like competence to stand trial, criminal responsibility at the time of an offense, civil commitment, and other areas?
I have. Over the course of my career, I've testified about 330 times with adults and juveniles. The issues have included things like transfer and sentencing, competence to stand trial, mental state at the time of the offense, civil commitment, and personal injury. I've testified on behalf of both the defense and the prosecution, and I've been qualified as an expert in juvenile criminal and civil litigation in both state and federal court. And I estimate that over the course of my career, I have conducted about 75% of the time I've conducted an evaluation and testified on behalf of the defense. And the remaining 25% have been conducted and testified on behalf of the prosecution or by order of the court.
And have there been times in that 25% of your casework that you've been retained by the prosecution, say for a criminal responsibility evaluation, where you find that the defendant is not criminally responsible and you have to tell the prosecutor that?
Yes, that happens with the prosecutor, and it also happens with the defense. And it's just something that we have to be able to do if we're in the profession of forensic psychology, because if we try to be thorough and accurate and impartial, then sometimes the results will favor whoever asks us to conduct the evaluation, and sometimes they won't. And what they have to hear, if my findings don't favor them, is that they're probably not going to want to use it.
And is there something called retention bias?
There is. That's something that's been discussed, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years. And there are a number of different kinds of biases that the field has paid particular attention to, potentially, over the last 20 years or so. And retention bias is the bias that is a part of what we can experience when we want to or inclined to favor the side that asks us to conduct the evaluation. And that's an important consideration. And I'm aware of it, and I try to guard against it as much as possible by talking with others, getting multiple sources of information, and a variety of other ways of doing that.
So when you conduct a forensic evaluation, you're actively guarding against having that retention bias?
Yes.
Now, have you specialized in any particular diagnosis or type of offense or legal question?
I have not specialized in that way. Most of my forensic evaluation experience has been with criminal and juvenile matters, and they have often included alleged crimes of violence, but I haven't specialized in any particular kind of mental or emotional disorder, any particular kind of crime, anything like that.
And when you say criminal and juvenile matters, are you referring to adults as the criminal portion and juveniles as juvenile?
I am, yes.
Okay. And do you find that there's a benefit to not focusing in on a particular illness or diagnosis or type of offense?
Yes, I do. Among the biases I talked about a minute ago, there's something called confirmation bias. And basically that's if you make up your mind earlier or incline toward one particular diagnosis or anything like that, then there can be a real problem, because when you get conflicting information, that is information that's not consistent with that decision that you've made or leaned toward early on, then the problem becomes you pay attention to the information that's consistent with it and you stay away from the information that isn't. And so in some ways, for me, not specializing gives me an advantage, because what I can do is come in and not be inclined toward any particular diagnosis or possible answer to a particular set of questions or a particular hypothesis or anything like that. What I can do is do my best to look at the different possibilities, and when there's evidence favoring one or supporting one, I'm inclined toward that. And when there's not, then I set it aside.
And have you had leadership experience in your field?
I have, yes. I served as the chair of my department at Drexel for 15 years, and I've also served as the president of two national organizations, the two that are most strongly associated with forensic psychology in this country. One is the American Psychology Law Society, and the other is the American Board of Forensic Psychology.
Your Honor, I'd move to submit Dr. Halbern's CV as the next exhibit.
That may be admitted.
Doctor, were you asked to conduct a forensic evaluation of Lindsay Clancy?
I was, yes.
And what did that entail, that forensic evaluation?
One of the things it entailed is doing my best to review a lot of information, to meet with Ms. Clancy in an interview, to speak with her in particular about what happened around the time of the alleged offense, to conduct collateral interviews with other individuals and review a wide range of documents. And so I have been reviewing documents since January of 2025. I had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Clancy in April of this year, 2026, and at that time spent 3 days with her along with Dr. Avram Mack. One of those days, which was video recorded, we talked about her background and a lot of information like that. The second day, where I met with her myself and did not video that because some of these psychological tests are private and they should not be videoed. So we did some psychological testing during that second day, and then on the third day, back with the video, back with Dr. Mack, we talked with Ms. Clancy about the things that she was thinking and feeling and doing around the time of the the alleged offense. And so I mentioned that I reviewed records. I've got a report sitting in front of me, and those records are spelled out over 4 pages, so I'm not going to run through the whole list with you. But those records did include things like cell phone records, the defense expert forensic psychiatric evaluation reports by Dr. Resnick and Dr. Spinelli, some Department of Children and Family records, digital forensic records, including texts and information that was provided by the watch that she wore, the Apple Watch, and the phone, variety of medical records, police investigative records, police interviews with many people, and grand jury proceedings, as well as surveillance footage of the Clancy family going to various places, Museum of Science visit, Cape Cod, CVs, that sort of thing.
And in total, all the time that you took to review these documents, look at the evidence, interview and test Ms. Clancy, approximately how much time have you spent on this case?
About 180 hours prior to coming to Plymouth. So most of that was spent in reviewing records. About 10 and a half hours was spent in meeting with Ms. Clancy and doing the testing. And then another hour and a half was spent in collateral interviews.
And who did you interview in collateral interviews?
I interviewed her former husband, Patrick Clancy, and his mother, Ms. Clancy's mother-in-law, Sue Clancy.
And did you also request to interview Ms. Clancy's mother and sister?
Not her mother. I did request to interview her sister, and I think she decided against that.
Now, you mentioned that when you interviewed Ms. Clancy on the first and third days, you were with Dr. Mack, correct?
Correct.
Why is it that you two were interviewing Ms. Clancy together on those days?
Well, that's something that I do sometimes, conduct a joint interview. That's done in training contexts, for example, a fair amount. And in this case, many of the questions that we were going to ask her, a large number of the questions that we're going to ask her about her background and her history were going to be similar. So we were able to conduct those, ask those questions in a way and save some time, keep her from having to go through and ask and answer them twice. Then the third day, again, many of the questions that we were going to ask had to do with her thinking, feeling, and behavior leading up to the time of January 24th. And basically, it involves kind of a step-by-step process, going very slowly, getting a lot of detail. And we expected that many of those questions, sort of step-by-step detail, were going to be things that we would be able to work on, or they were going to be things that we could ask twice, or we could ask once and see it on the video.
And in terms of your interviewing Ms. Clancy together, after that was done, did the two of you come up with a joint opinion on a diagnosis?
We did not, no. Although we were interviewing her together on 2 days, we took that information and we each independently came up with our own report, our own review of that information, our own analysis of what it meant, and so on. So, no, we wrote separate reports. We actually did not agree on the diagnosis.
Now, if we could have the PowerPoint. In terms of your evaluation of Ms. Clancy, including the records and the collateral interviews and your interviews of her, did you form some main conclusions?
I did, yes.
And if you could tell us, what were your major findings regarding Ms. Clancy's mental health history before September of 2022?
She had a fairly limited mental health history before September 2022. She did experience some anxiety related to achievement. She's a very strong student in school, and she got straight A's, basically. She experienced some anxiety while in nursing school doing case presentations because you have to stand up in front of a group, and that made her kind of anxious. And then she had some anxiety connected with her 3 pregnancies, some in the beginning about the ultrasounds and so on, and some sort of as she was returning to work. So after each child, she'd have some time off with a child, and then after several months she would return to work. And on each of those occasions, with Cora and Dawson and Callan, she had some anxiety because she didn't like to leave her children. That was an important consideration for her, whether it was dropping them off at school or returning to work or leaving them with a babysitter or going out with friends, going out on date night. She didn't like to leave them. And so those were some of the things that were connected with her mental health history before September of 2022. And this was in the context of her growing up as a highly achieving individual, getting very strong grades, competing in sports and competitive cheerleading. These are all things that the anxiety probably pushed her a little bit more in the direction of doing this very well, because she was a very hardworking and highly self-disciplined individual. She also grew up in a family that was close and comfortable, and had a number of friends that she spent time with, both as a girl and a teenager and so on. But she was very highly achieving, and I think one of the important aspects of her mental health history before September of 2022 is that she really did not experience anxiety in a way that interfered very much with her functioning. She had a little bit of she had about 6 months worth of treatment for the anxiety connected with the nursing school. But it was not something that interfered with her life very much prior to September of 2022.
And doctor, did you also learn that growing up as a child, she didn't experience any type of abuse, witness any domestic violence, have any sort of trauma or anything like that as she was growing up?
Yes, one of the psychological tests, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences measure, and that's something that asks an individual whether they went through what we would call adverse experiences or traumatic experiences as a child and an adolescent. And there are 10 of them, and if you have 4 or more of them, that puts you at higher risk for different kinds of adverse outcomes as an adult. She did not endorse any of those. So on the ACEs questionnaire, she had a 0, which really goes to the question that you ask of whether she had adverse or traumatic experiences as a child.
And so she did not, correct? She did not report any.
She did not report any, and there were any number of individuals who were asked similar questions about her childhood and her adolescence, and they all said basically no, she did not.
And then can you tell us about your major findings for the mental health history beginning in September 2022?
Yes, I can. So it was about 12 weeks after her son Callan was born, and she was feeling very anxious and sometimes depressed about having to leave him when he went back to work. There were two reasons for that. One is that she had felt anxious about leaving her children on a number of occasions and with the previous kids. But the second reason was she was breastfeeding and Callan was not taking the bottle. And so she was worried if she went back to work. She worked as a labor and delivery nurse on the night shifts. And she was worried that if she left Callan home and he woke up in the night and wouldn't take the bottle, there would be a problem. And so that was what got her particularly anxious. And what happened was she searched for a psychiatrist, found one, Dr. Jennifer Tufts, in September, and went to Dr. Tufts and got a prescription for Zoloft she wanted to reduce her anxiety somewhat. And she didn't begin taking it immediately. She was a little bit worried about the impact that it might have on the breast milk. But sometime in October, she began taking the Zoloft. And things started getting very difficult at that point.
And doctor, did you learn how things became difficult from the records in your interview of her?
I did, both of those, and from, I guess you could say the records, because a number of people had talked about that, including her husband, Patrick, and I also got some of that information from him as well during the collateral interview.
And what did you learn?
What was happening toward the end of his 12-week paternity leave is that she was getting more anxious when she started in mid-October taking the Zoloft. She immediately began to have some difficulty. The anxiety did not get better. In fact, it got worse. There were some symptoms of depression. She immediately started having some really difficult insomnia. And felt a lot of stress and so on. And so in October and moving into November, she had hoped to return to work and planned to return to work, but it was not going to work out for her because her symptoms were really difficult. So in the middle of November, she texted her mother-in-law, Sue Clancy, who was at work, also a nurse, and she was in the emergency room at South Shore Hospital. She felt unwell. She was having problems sleeping. She had a racing heart. She had lost some of her appetite. Continuing into November, she was struggling with anxiety, severe insomnia, palpitations. She was just having a lot of difficulty with the thought of leaving the baby, racing thoughts, feeling overwhelmed, and things like that. So moving further into November, into late November, she was just having real difficulty with sleep disruption, and she had concerns all along, starting in mid-October, about the impact of the medications. It was her thought that the medications were giving her some of these adverse reactions because it was really difficult for her to look at this and say, I wanted to get some improvement in the anxiety, and I did not. Instead, it got worse. And so late in November, she was still having a lot of trouble sleeping. She thought that she was close to what she called the end of her rope. She was feeling off and disconnected and sort of like a zombie. and she began to report panic symptoms, concerns about being addicted or dependent on the benzodiazepines, some kind of disoriented and forgetful and disconnected from her body. So she was having a lot of difficulty with what she thought were the medication that was resulting in this kind of impact. And then into December, it was not getting better.
And sir, if I could just interrupt you.
Yes.
On your PowerPoint here, are we still on number 3 here, or have we moved on?
I don't know as he finished his answer.
Why don't you come in focus?
Are we still on number 3, or have we moved on?
We're still on number 2,
okay.
but I'm also slipping in a little bit of number 3 as I answer number 2.
Okay. And if you could please continue describing what was happening in December of 2022.
Yes. Around this time, late November, early December, she began to experience what she called horrible, intrusive thoughts. And those thoughts were about harming herself, potentially. And as she continued to experience these kinds of thoughts later into December and January, they would occasionally be about harming the children. But for the most part, particularly early on, these were thoughts about possible suicide and harming herself. And the way she described it is these thoughts would just pop into my head, and they included things like, your brain is damaged, you need to kill yourself. Now, the way she described these is they were not auditory hallucinations. Instead, they were her own thoughts. They were intrusive and unwelcome, but they were not auditory hallucinations. And that's important because if she had been hearing a voice like you're hearing my voice right now, it comes from outside of your head. And that's a different kind of a symptom than having thoughts, even unwelcome and intrusive thoughts that are in your head. If it's coming from outside, that is very likely a psychotic symptom. And if it's a psychotic symptom, then that has different implications for what's wrong with you, as opposed to something that is unwelcome and intrusive, but inside your own head.
And doctor, the way she described these thoughts that she was having in December about harming herself, in the medical records and in her conversations with you, she described those as unwelcome but internal thoughts, correct?
Yes, that's right. It was important because of what I just said that I asked her the question, when you were experiencing these thoughts, were they like your own thoughts or were they like auditory hallucinations? And she said they were like my own thoughts. And she made it clear that they were unwelcome and intrusive, but they were like my own thoughts. And she didn't get to talking about experiencing auditory hallucinations, as I will talk about a little bit later, until January 24th. And so she continued to have real difficulty with various kinds of problems. She had lost about 15 pounds, not intending to. She was having tremors and sweating and GI symptoms and sadness, severe depression, that sort of thing, as she described it. Feeling numb and zombie-like were her words, again in December. And then by middle December, it was getting very difficult for her as she talked about it. Her sleep was getting a little bit better, but she was continuing to have significant symptoms of depression, things like hopelessness and the loss of capacity for pleasure and things like that. She described her experience on December 15th of 2022 as one of her worst days. She went to, her husband took her to Mass General that day, and she did not stay very long, but it was one of those things that was really difficult. The symptoms were, as she saw it, pretty bad. And then on December 20th, she went to a hospital called Women and Infants in Rhode Island, and they had a day program for postpartum individuals having difficulties, and they said that they weren't going to take her, that she didn't meet their criteria for the postpartum program. Generally, that was because they said that she looked like she was having a general anxiety symptoms and depressive disorders, but not so much the postpartum necessarily. And
doctor, if I could just stop you
No,
a little bit.
You finished with that description of what information you got from that provider?
not quite, Judge, but almost.
Okay.
I apologize.
Yes.
You can finish.
So she was not going to remain in women and infants, and the next step that she took was hospitalization at McLean.
And so if I could ask you a follow-up question now, before we
Yes.
go on to McLean,
Yes.
about women and infants. Were you able to review the women and infants records?
I was, yes.
And looking at the women and infants records, on page 9 I have here, it states that patient was offered several options for her, including inpatient treatment for medication management, a partial hospital program focused on general mental health, or continued outpatient management. Patient plans to follow up with her outpatient provider for guidance. So even though they said she didn't necessarily fit into their postpartum program, they did offer her 3 other programs, correct?
They did, yes.
And her response, Ms. Clancy's response, was that she was going to discuss that with her provider for guidance, correct?
Yes.
And in reviewing the records of Dr. Tufts and Rebecca Gelada, did you ever see any mention of the defendant actually following through with that and discussing with them those 3 options that were offered by women and infants?
No, what I saw is that they were back to being treated according to the plan and the medication and so on. But she was back to being treated, discussing with Dr. Tufts what the best implications were for treatment.
Okay. And then you were about to talk about what happened at McLean. So if you could please tell us what you learned about McLean and how that was impactful to your analysis or your evaluation.
Yes. She was admitted to McLean on January 1st of 2023. And what got her there was suicidal thinking. That was very difficult for her. That was a very difficult time to experience that sort of thing. And so she went into McLean on January 1st, and their admission documentation listed postpartum depression and major depressive disorder, which they described as recurrent and mild. While she was in McLean, what she reported as her primary concern was insomnia. And she said that while she was hospitalized, it actually made her more anxious than being at home. And when she was asked about the suicidal impulses and thoughts, she said that she would not commit suicide because of her children and her mother. So she had they asked about reasons for living, among other things, and those were some of the ones that she cited.
Doctor, would that be called a protective factor?
Yes, sometimes it's called a protective factor.
And that's something that protects you or prevents you from committing suicide?
Yes, would keep you from doing something like that.
Okay. And then what were your further findings?
So she stayed at McLean for 5 days, and she was documented as not having safety concerns and at minimal risk for returning to the community by January 3rd. She described her mood there as numb, but she denied things like delusions or hallucinations or suicidal thoughts that were continuing or homicidal thinking. And at the time she was discharged on the 5th of January, she was described as cooperative and pleasant, with no psychosis, no suicidal or homicidal thinking. And she said, when I was asking her about it, that when she left McLean, she had what she described as a small shred of hope after discharge, because she was off of medication, Seroquel, which she thought was causing her a lot of trouble. But the intrusive suicidal thoughts returned, she said, within a week or so following her discharge from McLean.
And would we be moving on now to number 3 on your PowerPoint?
Yes, we are.
Symptoms following the beginning of medication. So what were your major findings in that area?
Well, I have, I think I've combined 2 and 3 as I've talked about this, because one of the things about this is after she started taking the medication in October, the Zoloft, she had, the anxiety didn't get better. She had great difficulty with insomnia. And she said she was numb. She felt like a zombie. It wasn't something that she was able to see any improvement in. In fact, she thought it was getting a lot worse. And so basically, what she thought is that the symptoms that she was experiencing following taking the medication that was prescribed beginning in October, she said the symptoms were getting worse, particularly a new symptom, which was insomnia.
We could move on to the next slide. Doctor, and does that bring us to number 4 on your PowerPoint, the adverse response to medications, including bad insomnia?
Yes, and I won't take nearly as long in talking about that, because one of the things that she thought was happening when she began taking that medication in October is that the medication itself was far from making the anxiety better. It was making it worse and keeping her from sleeping, and it was, she thought, making it difficult for her to she thought that the medication was actually making it a real problem for her to sleep, to feel. She felt emotionally numb and that sort of thing. And so accompanying the bad insomnia with the apparent adverse responses, producing the insomnia and other things, was a real problem for her as she saw it. And it's one of the things that she continued to emphasize to providers, whether it was Dr. Tufts or Ms. Gelada, a nurse practitioner. She said, basically, I think these medications are making me worse. But one of the things, moving on to number 5 there, one of the things she also said is that she was focusing on making the anxiety, helping the anxiety get better through medication. There was a little bit of counseling going on with Ms. Gelada, but one of the things that she did not really have was, say, a cognitive behavioral therapist or something like that to help her work through the problems. She thought that medication was going to try to help, and it really did. It was something that she focused on a good deal.
And when you say she was focused, the defendant was focused on medication resolving her problems, would that include talking to doctors about different medications to try, researching medications on her own, asking friends and family for tips on medications, things like that?
Yes, all of those things.
Okay. And then should we move on to number 6, the mixed evidence about diagnosis and the nature of her problems?
Yes.
And what were your major findings in that area?
over the course of the time that she was going through these experiences between mid-October and late January, she'd had a lot of providers offer a lot of diagnoses, and there were a lot of complicating considerations. So among some of the diagnoses that she'd been given were adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder 2, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, post-traumatic stress disorder. That last one was not before January of 2023, but it's something that she has right now. And in addition to those diagnoses, which sort of implies that she has a disorder and she has symptoms, there were complicating factors. She had psychotropic medication with apparent adverse reaction. She had serious sleep deprivation over a 3-month period. She had between 5 and 8 months after the birth of her third child. She had anxiety about returning to work in the fall of 22. She was worried about leaving her baby for work, and he was not taking the bottle. And the other thing, which was important for her, is she was always someone who was, she was into exercise. And she stopped exercising sometime in October when she started having these adverse reactions. But it's one of these things that it was a real difficult thing for her to handle when she couldn't do the running or the yoga or the Peloton or other things that she used to keep her anxiety managed.
Were you aware that she was able to return to exercising on several dates in December and in January, going to the Kingsbury Club where she was a member?
Yes, she was trying that, yes.
Yeah. And is that something that, as putting on your clinician hat for a moment, is that something that you would recommend to a patient that they, in this situation, that they try to do things like exercise to complement medication and therapy?
Well, if it works, it does work for some people, and they use it effectively over the course of their lives, particularly if they have some anxiety that might not fully need treatment, but it's something that might interfere with your life a little bit.
And what were your next observations?
Well, if we could move on to the next slide, please.
So here we have number 7, your diagnosis, bipolar 2 disorder. So was that your diagnosis of Ms. Clancy?
It was, and it was hard because of all the diagnoses in the records and all the symptoms that she experienced and so on. To make a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or bipolar 2 disorder, which is a kind of a less serious way of experiencing bipolar disorder, you have to have identifiable mood swings, and one is a period of depression, which she certainly had, but a period of depression, and that was something that made a big difference over a certain period of time in depressed symptoms and sadness and not having much or not having much motivation and things like that. But you also, for a bipolar diagnosis, need something where you have an identifiable period where the mood is much greater. It's much. One of the things that I might say is that one feels during a manic period sort of high, jumpy, decreased need for sleep, racing thoughts, sort of flight of ideas, thinking really fast, excessive appetites for different kinds of things, not getting tired, feeling important and powerful, and things like that. And I was having a hard time finding something that looked like it was a manic episode. There were times when she felt, as she described it after the birth of different children. She felt good. She felt on top of the world. She felt really close to them, to her husband and her kids, and so on. But it's also something that it didn't look like a manic episode so much as it looked like she was really feeling good and getting back into exercise and things like that. So it's one of those considerations where the thing that sort of gave me pause for a while in diagnosing a bipolar disorder is that I didn't see that manic episode. But what really convinced me is that she's been at Tewksbury now for more than 3.5 years. And the diagnosis of record at Tewksbury is bipolar disorder. And they are, as I read the records, very careful about what they prescribe and how much, and various other kinds of considerations. And one of the things that the records reflect is that when she was on some medication that's prescribed to help stabilize her mood, and it was discontinued for medical reasons, she had a kind of immediate response to that, which is to say, she noticed it, and that's a consideration as well. So I ended up with making a diagnosis of bipolar II disorder, which is a slightly less, not slightly, it's a less severe form of bipolar disorder.
And doctor, why did you diagnose with bipolar II and not bipolar?
Because bipolar, as I said, is a more severe kind of diagnosis. It's more noticeable. And if you had a bipolar diagnosis, then I would want to see something that clearly and definitely looks like a manic episode. And I did not see any evidence of that before January 24th of 2023.
And there were some incidents that have been described by witnesses who have testified and in the medical records, things like the defendant cleaning out her garage with her husband at one point in time. Was that something that you did or did not see as manic, and why?
Well, there was some indication in the records that some people thought it was manic. I did not see it that way. She did not describe, when I asked her, whether she did not describe that as a manic episode. She didn't think it was. And when I talked to Patrick Clancy, he said he didn't think it was either. And basically it was cleaning out the garage and getting a lot of stuff into 20 trash bags and so on. But one of the things he said is, they were both working hard, but it wasn't all her out there putting stuff in 20 trash bags, and he wasn't a part of it. He said he was definitely a part of it.
And would it be accurate that bipolar disorder requires that period of mania for, I believe it's 7 days, where bipolar II requires hypomania for 4 days? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And so did you see signs of hypomania?
Well, that's something where it's less clear that it's manic, and that's one of the things that inclined me toward bipolar II is I just did not see signs that were clearly manic episodes, but it looked like something that it possibly could have been a less serious or less severe manic episode.
And in terms of this diagnosis, this bipolar II, is there a way to determine whether she always had this disorder or if it's something new, and if it's something new, when it appeared?
It's a disorder that typically comes on in adulthood. It's not something that you have as a kid or even for the most part as an adolescent. It's something that you start to show the signs of when you are in your 20s or 30s.
Okay. And so at this point, would it be time to move on to number 8 on your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Which would be criminal responsibility evaluation, so mental state and legal standard are relevant. So what were your findings on number 8?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say about number 8 is that I wasn't called up here just to make a diagnosis or talk about symptoms. This is a criminal responsibility evaluation. And one of the things that I take a look at very carefully when I'm doing something like this is what's the standard for criminal responsibility in the jurisdiction. Now, I'm aware that the court will instruct the jury about the standard and how you apply it and so on, but my understanding of the standard for criminal responsibility in Massachusetts is that a person is not criminally responsible if at the time of the offense they suffered from a mental disease or defect and as a result lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. So there were really three parts. There really are three parts to that criminal responsibility standard. The first is mental disease or defect, and that's one of the reasons why I've paid so much attention to the symptoms and when they began and things like that. But the other thing that I try to do is take those symptoms and see how they affect somebody, in this case Ms. Clancy's, capacity for knowing that something like this was illegal or wrong, or how they affected her capacity for conforming her conduct to the requirements of the law, which I think of as kind of controlling her behavior.
And to determine, is that something that those three elements are those things that you kept in mind throughout your evaluation of the records and your interview of the defendant and the psychological testing that you did?
It is, yes, and it's something that I put on page 1 of my report because I always try to do that to try to make it as clear as I can that this is something I'm paying attention to throughout the entire evaluation.
So that's your mindset when approaching the evaluation of Ms. Clancy?
It is, yes.
Okay. And so what types of psychological testing did you do with Ms. Clancy?
There were several reasons why I wanted to do psychological testing. One is what we call response style. In a matter like this, somebody like Ms. Clancy during an interview could respond what we call reliably, which is within the limits of her memory, as accurately as she possibly can. But there are other response styles. One is that somebody could do what we call exaggeration or even fabrication. Sometimes that's called malingering, which is they distort or they take the kind of report that they do and they exaggerate or even fabricate the severity of what they are experiencing. And then the other kind of response style is to underreport, basically to say, I'm going to minimize or even deny things that I actually experience. So response style is always important in doing a forensic evaluation like this, and I paid attention to it. And one of the psychological tests that I administered, something called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, has scales that allow me to look and say, is she being kind of reliable, or is she exaggerating or fabricating, or is she minimizing or denying? So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to do these tests. The second is I wanted to pay attention to possible symptoms of what we call severe mental illness, things like hallucinations or delusions or mental disorganization. They can't really kind of focus on what's being discussed so much as you tend to get off track or have tangential speech, which is kind of running off the topic and going to different ways and so on. Cognitive disorganization is another speech. There's also review of her reported symptoms around January 24th of 2023, and I wanted to ask her questions in a fairly comprehensive way about that. There are other symptoms that she was experiencing, reportedly, depression in particular, and I wanted to know how depressed she was feeling. And so that was something that I could also measure with these psychological tests. And then finally, suicidal thinking was quite important. And I wanted to ask her questions about her thinking and feeling and behavior related to suicide, kind of leading up to January 24th and then around that time. So these are all reasons why I gave her psychological tests.
Could I have you pause there for a moment?
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's a good time
It's a
to break.
good time to break. All right, why don't we do that? Thank you. All right, so members of the jury, we're going to take the afternoon recess at this point. You know my instructions, so they're going to be the same. Don't talk about this case. Don't do any research about this case. Don't listen to anything about it. Don't read anything about it. Have a nice break, and we'll have you come back here about 2 o'clock. Okay?
Court, all rise. All rise, please. Good. Close the notebooks, place them on your chair, just like this.
All right, Doc, you may step down. All right. Anything we need to address before 2 o'clock? All right. So we'll be in recess till approximately 2 o'clock.
Court is back in session. You may be seated.
Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, excluding the jury.
All right, counsel, we all set for the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, yeah, bring him in.
Court, all rise. Jurors entering. This court is now in session. Please be seated.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including the defendant and including the 18 jurors.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of the jury, we're going to return now to the direct exam of this witness. All right? Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, before we broke, you were describing the various psychological tests that you conducted on Ms. Clancy. Can you tell us the results of those tests?
Yes, I can. On the MMPI, which I spoke about first, and this was, of course, 3.5 years after the alleged offense. So it's going to describe, much of it is going to describe her thinking and feeling and behavior in April of 2026 rather than January of 2023. But it's something that's always a challenge when you try to reconstruct what happened some time ago. And so some of these tests were administered from the standpoint of what was it like for you back then. But the MMPI was delivered in terms of how you're doing right now. And she, on the response style scales that I talked about earlier, she showed a slight tendency to underreport, to deny unusual experiences, although she did that in a way that was pretty sophisticated. She's a bright woman. And so given this, we kind of take into account a little bit the fact that she might be underreporting a little bit in terms of what's really wrong with her. However, there are a number of what we call clinical scales on this test, and she was not elevated on any of them, meaning that she's not actively symptomatic in many areas or in great distress in certain ways. But there was one scale that is elevated, and that is the suicide and death ideation scale, thinking about suicide and death. And I should say that Ms. Clancy has been on 1-to-1 suicide precautions, which is the highest level of precautions that a hospital can take, since she came to Tewksbury. This is a very long time to be on that kind of precautions, and what it says to me is that she was at risk for suicide, she remains at risk for suicide, and so she still is. The Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire I mentioned earlier, basically it's a measure of whether somebody is reporting experiencing as a child or adolescent adverse or traumatic events, and she was not, so she had a 0 on that. There were 2 measures of suicide intent. One is called Beck's Suicide Intent Scale, and the other is called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. And I can sum up those results very quickly by saying that when she responded to one of them as she would have if she'd been filling it out in January of 2023, what it suggested is that this was a very serious suicide attempt at that time. And when she responded to both of them as she feels right now, she also was indicating that she remains at high risk for suicide, and hence the 1-to-1 supervision for 3.5 years. The brief symptom inventory is something where you ask people about a number of possible symptoms that they've been experiencing within the last month or so. Gave it to her under 2 circumstances. One is, how are you doing right now? That is around April of this year. And the other was, how are you doing in January of 2023? Her description of how she was doing in January of 2023 is that she endorsed feeling blue or still extremely depressed, feeling no interest in things, thoughts of death or dying, feeling hopeless about the future, feeling very self-conscious with others, and the idea that something is wrong with her mind. She thought depression, suspiciousness, memory problems, problems with attention and concentration, and things like she was having trouble concentrating, so she'd be cooking, for instance, and she'd forget what step she was on. So most of these are consistent with symptoms of depression. And so I thought that they were good indications that she was endorsing feelings of depression, although she was improving somewhat from her December feelings. Something called the Obsessional Beliefs Questionnaire has 3 scales. One scale is kind of responsibility threat estimation, which is a belief about your personal responsibility and overestimation of threats. She was not elevated on that. A second was perfectionism and certainty. She was not elevated on that either, although she works hard and so on, but she was not elevated on the perfectionist aspect of this test right now. However, she was elevated on something called importance and control of thoughts, meaning that for her, it's always been important to be able to work hard and control what's going on with her mind and her life. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that I think was making her depressed and hopeless and sad and so on is that she had been trying very hard since October to to basically control the problems that she was having, and it wasn't working. It was not succeeding for her. Okay, and then there was something called the Mahoney-Slade hallucination scale. And so she endorsed the following things. Sometimes a passing thought will seem so real it frightens me. Sometimes I get distracted trying to concentrate on my work. That was something she endorsed back in 22 and 23. In the past, I've had the experience of hearing a person's voice and then found there was no one there. That was only on January 24th. I often hear a voice speaking my thoughts aloud, again, only on January 24th. I've been troubled by hearing voices in my head, again, only on January 24th. All right, so those were the psychological testing results, and I'm going to move to the last item on the PowerPoint here, which is why it was important for me to consider her motivation for killing her children. And this is something that, if you look at Lindsay Clancy, would be described as so out of character that I just like to know what could possibly have been going on. Because, for instance, when I talked to her and talked to her husband as well about how do you discipline your kids, it was never spanking, it was never hands-on, it was never anything like that. They both felt bad when they yelled at the kids. So it was one of those things that to imagine her doing something like this is really seems so out of character that I thought it was very important to try to figure out why it might have happened. So this is how I approached it. The other thing about the why question is it could well be something that is valuable to know when we're thinking about whether she understood that something was wrong, or when she was thinking about whether she could conform her conduct to the requirements of the law or control herself. The why question seemed important. So if I could have the next slide.
Sure. And in evaluating the why, did you come up with two possible explanations?
I did, yes, which is on this slide.
And so can you explain that, please?
I can, yes. There are a number of reasons in my experience why people harm one another, why people kill one another. And most of these reasons ended up not applying to Miss Clancy. I mean, it wasn't job-related. She wasn't in the military, the police. Didn't have to do with money or property or fame or anger or being callous or abusive or being afraid or doing it himself. None of those there was any evidence for. But there were a couple of things that started to have some evidence for, and this is what it looked like. One is the psychosis, the possibility that she had a severe mental illness, experiencing hallucinations, delusions, that sort of thing. And as part of that, on January 24th, experienced those symptoms that we're going to talk about in a minute. And I'm calling that the first bullet point there, acute psychosis with command hallucinations. The second possible explanation was as part of an attempt to take one's own life, as part of a suicide, one might harm one's children if you thought that would prevent them from suffering. And let me see if I can give you an example of that. If one of us were to learn and we had no doubt in our mind that the Holocaust was coming tomorrow, and we thought that was going to be awful, and I can't live through that, and so I'm going to take my own life. If I had children, the question might come up, do I take them with me? Do I take their lives as well? Now, I'm not saying that I would definitely do that, But what I'm saying is that it would come up as a possibility in what I thought about. And so there ended up being, in my mind, two possible explanations for why she did what she did. The first being the acute psychosis with command hallucinations, and the second being this was a serious suicide attempt, and she wanted the children to be with her so she wouldn't be separated from them, and so they wouldn't have to suffer after she was gone. Now, in a minute, I'm going to talk about the evidence that I saw supporting each of those, but I will tell you right now, in advance of talking about that most of the evidence that I saw supported the second one and not the first.
And so, Doctor, if we could go to the next slide and you could talk to us, tell us what evidence you saw for acute psychosis with command hallucinations.
Yes. The first was, that's what she said. I asked her that question, and that's the way she explained it happened. She said, sometime on the afternoon of January 24th, 2023, that she heard a voice, and the voice said, "This is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself." If she actually heard a voice like that, that would be evidence of psychosis being experienced and what we call command hallucinations, where the voice is instructing her to do something. There were some other possible things that made me think that it could be a severe mental illness that she was experiencing, and two in particular. One was thinking that others might know her thoughts. Now, this is something that is a symptom of psychosis called thought broadcasting if it's experienced in a certain way. In thought broadcasting, if I'm experiencing that, I literally have the idea that if I'm thinking it, you can hear what I'm saying, just as if I were putting it on the television or podcast or a movie or whatever. It's just coming out that way. I asked her about that, and she said, and other people asked her about that too, and she said it was not thought broadcasting, but these were very vivid thoughts, and she thought that it might be that people could hear them as vivid and strong as they were. The second possible symptom is that thinking police might take her children. Now, in some of the records I saw people saying, "Well, this looks like a paranoid delusion to me." And I will tell you that it didn't look either paranoid or like a delusion to me. And here's why. I'm a healthcare professional, and that means that in Pennsylvania and every other state I know, I'm a mandated reporter. If someone tells me in therapy or in an assessment that they think that a child is going to be injured or severely hurt or that might happen, then I'm required by law to contact Childline in Pennsylvania. Ms. Clancy is a labor and delivery nurse. She's a healthcare professional as well. And so it's one of those things where if she had said to a psychiatrist, psychologist, anyone providing treatment, that she thought she was experiencing ideas like she might harm her kids, she would know as a mandated reporter that they were legally required to report that. Now, that might not mean that the police would literally come and take her kids away, but it would mean that there would be an investigation. She would have to answer questions, and it might be that for a period of time she would be separated from the children.
And Doctor, is it?
Well, she answer?
I thought he was done.
I don't know. Well, let's find out. Were you done?
I just want to ask a follow-up question about your last point. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, that's okay.
And so you mentioned you didn't think it was a delusion. Is it true that a delusion is a fixed false belief?
Yes, that's the way it's defined.
And so Ms. Clancy, thinking that if someone knew she thought of harming her kids might be taken away, that's not a false belief, correct?
Well, that was what I was trying to say, is that it is not a false belief. It's quite possible that it could come to pass.
And if you could continue with your discussion of why the evidence you saw for acute psychosis.
Yes. The other point there at the bottom is that it's appealing as an explanation because it could explain acts that seem so out of character for her. You don't have to get complicated at all. It's just, I had a psychotic episode. I heard a voice. The voice told me to do something terrible. I did it.
And after considering the evidence for acute psychosis, command hallucinations, did you then consider evidence against acute psychosis with command hallucinations?
I did, yes.
And what did you see?
One of the reasons, well, the first bullet point here is that the way she described this as happening is that she heard a voice that she'd never heard before, experienced an hallucination, and she's never experienced it since, but she only experienced it for the 18 minutes or so that it took to kill the children. And to put it mildly, that would be a very, very unusual pattern or manifestation of how this kind of thing comes about. Very unusual. I've been doing this kind of evaluation for many, many years, and I'm always very careful when someone tells me that they experienced a symptom only during the course of committing an offense.
Why is that, doctor? Why are you careful when someone tells you that they only experience this voice during a criminal offense?
Well, because it provides a convenient way of lessening your own culpability. I mean, it's always possible, but as I said, I find it very, very rare, whereas an explanation for why somebody did something, somebody might look at that and say, it's a convenient way of somebody looks at me and I don't have the same culpability that I would otherwise.
And what was the next part of evidence that you saw against acute psychosis?
There was some discussion of whether this was postpartum, and so she was about 8 months away from having given birth to Callan, her youngest child, and most of the explanations or most of the sources of authority like DSM-5 or the Cleveland Clinic will point to maybe 1 month after birth or 2 months after birth or something like that. But the farther away you get time-wise from the birth, the less likely it is under those kinds of authority to be postpartum. Now, it could be something else. And there were certainly some things that I saw that were symptoms of depression and other sorts of things that she experienced in January. But it was, given the time, it was less likely, I thought, to be postpartum. Then the next bullet was inconsistencies in her account. To me, when asked about this, she said, the voice said, "This is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself." And it just kept repeating that, and only that, for about 18 minutes, or the duration of the time it took to do this. There were other times, though, for instance, when she was in the hospital after this happened and was talking to a psychiatric attending, when she said that the voice had said other things, for example, the children will suffer without you, or you have to take the kids with you, or things like that. So inconsistency is important because it suggests inaccuracy. In other words, which version is accurate? Is it the first Is it the second? Is it neither? I mean, here it couldn't be both, because she said, I only heard this. To some people she said that, and then I heard this plus this. To other people she said that. So,
Doctor, if she had said to a third person that it was a different version, such as you have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself because there's a danger to you and the kids, would that be a further consideration of the inconsistencies?
Objection.
Yeah, overall, yes.
the more inconsistency there is,
Can we have a basis for that, at least?
The test,
It's asked as a hypothetical?
hypothetical, yes.
I'll allow that.
So it's not based on evidence, it's a hypothetical.
It's a hypothetical.
you might have to repeat the question.
So if the person has a third version of what happened, what the voice said, and what the reasons the voice gave, would that be important in your assessment as well regarding inconsistency?
Objection. It's speculation, it's not based on evidence, and there's no foundation for a hypothetical question.
Why don't you just ask it as the hypothetical? Assuming this, and go that way.
Doctor, a hypothetical question for you. Assuming that a person has already given two versions of a voice, what the voice said for them to do, and then gives a third version of what the voice told them to do, would that be significant to you in assessing the inconsistencies?
Objection for the record.
Yeah, overall, go ahead.
What I would say is the more inconsistency there is, the more problematic I find it to take any one particular account and say this is the accurate one.
And then what other evidence did you find against acute psychosis?
There is some research that's been conducted on malingered hallucinations, which are accounts of hallucinations that are exaggerated or fabricated. And I found it useful to look at those, look at that research and see what it suggested and kind of lay it out there in terms of the way she described it. So some research suggests that that one consideration is whether the voices are internal or external, whether they're coming from your own thoughts or whether they're coming from outside of your head. And Ms. Clancy perceived this voice as external, which is more consistent with genuine hallucinations. However, command hallucinations are often, in about 88% of individuals reporting them by one account, accompanied by a related delusion. Ms. Clancy did not report any accompanied delusions. So thus far you've got 1 point for genuine and 1 point for possible exaggerated. Then there's frequency and control. Genuine psychotic hallucinations are more often intermittent than constant. They'll come and they'll go. You'll hear it, stop hearing it. You'll hear it again, stop hearing it, and this can extend over a period of time. Ms. Clancy, in this instance, reported that the voice was constant for 18 to 20 minutes, and then it stopped. It had not been experienced before, and it has not been experienced since. And she also did not report having any control over the voice or over her actions in response to the voice. Then the next item is content. So genuine hallucinations are often familiar, use both genders, and are clear rather than vague. Ms. Clancy described this voice as clear, but it was unfamiliar and it was a single male voice. So that was sort of mixed. I'm not counting it as one direction or another. And then finally, reaction and coping. Individuals who experience hallucinations like this often try to reduce their influence in different ways. Could be praying, could be listening to music, and while those who inaccurately report the experience of such hallucinations often do not describe coping mechanisms. And Ms. Clancy didn't report any attempt to stop the voice or distract herself from it or what have you. So there were about 3 points on which her account more closely resembled exaggerated or fabricated hallucinations, one where it looked more genuine and one that was kind of mixed.
If I could ask you a question, you said that there were more points indicating malingering or exaggerating the existence of the voice. But earlier you testified about your psychological testing of Ms. Clancy, and it showed minimization, and it didn't show malingering. Could you explain how those two things could occur in the same person at the same time?
Yes. When we try to appraise through testing or specialized measures something that looks like malingering or exaggeration, the way we typically do it as psychologists who develop the measures is it looks like somebody who is going to take a shotgun approach. They're going to say unusual things are wrong and strange things are wrong and many things are wrong and things like that. If you do that, we're pretty good at picking up that shotgun approach to malingering. But if I ask you a bunch of questions and you answer them almost entirely in a genuine way, that you're being as accurate as you can, except with one exception, when I ask you about one experience or one symptom and you exaggerate or fabricate that, it's we can't pick that up through our testing. So what we have to do instead is we have to kind of develop our ideas about how it might have been experienced, what it was consistent with, what the disorder is. We take a broader approach, which is what I've tried to do in talking about this.
We'll go to the next slide, please. And was there further evidence against acute psychosis?
Yes. I'm going to start with the question of thoughts or hallucinations. I've already said that I found the account of hallucinations to be, as she described it, it would be very, very unusual to experience it that way. Never having, not before, not since, constantly for 18 minutes. However, if this was a thought, an unwelcome, intrusive thought, but still a thought, that's basically this is your last chance, you have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself, then that would be consistent with thoughts that she'd been experiencing for some time. She'd been having thoughts about harming herself, that she was, it was going to be very difficult for her to do this in a way that was that made sense. She was experiencing thoughts about hurting herself because her brain might have been damaged. She was experiencing thoughts about hurting the kids. She was experiencing all sorts of unwelcome thoughts. If that were the case on January 24th, if these were thoughts, then that would be consistent with what she'd been experiencing for months before. So that was something that made more sense to me, that rather than an auditory hallucination, it would have been an unwelcome, intrusive thought. The next bullet is her response to her husband's question, what did you do? So when he got home around 6 p.m. on January 24th, and the house was quiet, and he went in, thought people might have been playing hide and seek with him, called downstairs, didn't get an answer, called upstairs, didn't get an answer, went upstairs, found the bedroom door locked, unlocked it with his key, went in, saw some blood there, saw the window was open, ran downstairs, and he saw his wife Lindsay lying there semi-conscious. And he said, his first question was, what did you do? And her response was, I tried to kill myself. Now, I thought that if she had actually experienced this command hallucination, that she might have said something like, I did what I had to do, or I did what the voice said, or something like that. But no, she said, I tried to kill myself. And this is consistent with my looking at this and starting from the perspective of this is a serious, highly lethal suicide attempt. And that's the way to understand it. And then the last bullet point has to do with the recovery of memories. So when she regained consciousness that night in the hospital, one of the things she said is that she wasn't able to remember what had happened. And she was informed of it, but if this had been a genuine memory loss, then human memory is funny. And one of the things that happens is that when you're trying to remember something that actually happened, things can interfere with that. Things that you read, things that you're told, other sorts of things like that. So it would have been hard to understand how she would recover that memory accurately, including the particular memory of the command auditory hallucination and what it said.
And Doctor, did you already go over the first bullet point, the inconsistencies in her description of knowing wrongfulness?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one. Go to the next slide.
Okay, you don't have that's not a consideration?
Well, there were some additional inconsistencies in terms of whether she knew that when I asked her whether she was aware that it was illegal or immoral, she said basically, I wasn't thinking about this at all. No thoughts, no decisions, none of that. It was just all action. One of the things that Dr. Resnick wrote in his report is that she was intellectually aware that it was wrong or illegal, but not morally. And what she said to me is that I just don't think I wasn't thinking about that at all. I didn't know any of that.
Okay. And if we could go to the next slide, I think if you could describe for us the evidence that you saw for suicide combined with altruistic filicide.
Yeah. Altruistic filicide is a term that's used that means killing your kids out of love. Not because you're trying to be cruel or for material gain or because you want them out of your lives or any of that, but killing them out of love so that you could basically, they wouldn't have to suffer, so you could prevent their suffering. And what she did, I thought, was begin with what I said a minute ago was a highly lethal and very serious suicide attempt.
And that was preceded
It
by
was
what?
preceded by months of thoughts and impulses about you should harm yourself, you should kill yourself, your brain is damaged, that sort of thing. And that, I think, is the beginning of the way to understand what happened that day. The second point is that, as I've said before, she didn't like to leave her children. Whether that was for date night or school or going back to work or anything, she did not like to leave her children. And if she had taken her own life, then her children would have been without her, and she thought that they would suffer. And she'd been having these thoughts both about herself and about her children over a several-month period. And the other thing that I will say is that she was in pain. She was suffering. She was doing a little bit better than she had been before she went into McLean. But she was still in pain. She was suffering. I think she was even desperate. And that is something that is often characterized as people who try to take their own life. They're in pain, they're suffering, and they're trying to put a stop to it. And I think when she decided at some point that she was going to put a stop to it, then she had to answer the question of what to do about the kids. And she didn't want to leave them, and she was convinced that they would suffer without her.
For the next slide. And further evidence that you saw for the suicide combined with altruistic filicide?
There was. One of the things that she said when asked about what happened is that in the course of strangling each child, she said, "Go to God, baby, go to God." And that was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God. She was raised as a Catholic, and this, as I understand Catholic considerations, that's not necessarily what happens. But when I asked her about that, when I said, "Isn't suicide a mortal sin?"
Yeah, can I see counsel over here? All right, and so I'm going to ask you to go back to the jury room, and then we'll bring you back in a couple of minutes. All right?
Court, all rise. Jurors, kindly close the notebooks. Please. This way.
This court's in session.
All right, we'll be in a short recess, and I'll come out as soon as I can.
Court, all rise. This court is back in session. Please be seated.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, excluding the jury.
All right. After the following sidebar conference, I think the defendant made a motion. I'm going to allow argument in regards to the motion. I'll hear first from the defendant, and then I will hear from the Commonwealth. Mr. Reddington.
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, this has been obviously a long trial and a lot of work on the part of everybody involved, from the court to the staff to the prosecutors to myself, and needless to say, the strain on Lindsay Clancy. I have to move for a mistrial reluctantly. The reason is that this is intentional misconduct on the part of the prosecution. You know that this whole idea of injecting Roman Catholic faith, the concept of mortal sin, into this trial occurred, I don't even remember now, about a week ago, and I objected, but before I could get the objection out, Your Honor had us at the sidebar at the same time, and very forcefully, in my opinion, indicated to the jurors that they should not consider that to any degree. At the time, I put on record the fact that I did not feel that I felt that the court's instructions were sufficient. They were forceful. They were right on point. And we moved forward without a motion for a mistrial. I made a tactical decision. But unfortunately, at this point, it's a concern I have because this is just over the top. It's the same thing again, talking about religion, talking about heaven, talking about killing people and the impact or the effect that it would have on Lindsay as well as her children. The fact that this is not the first time that it occurred during the trial, and the prosecution has previously brought up the concept of mortal sin, based on your ruling in the past, in conjunction with the fact that they brought it up again, I believe it was intentional misconduct, and I feel that the court should grant the motion for mistrial.
All right, thank you. Commonwealth?
Thank you, Your Honor. The question I asked the witness did not ask for any testimony about religion, about Catholicism, about mortal sins, or anything like that. And the slide is still up on the screen. There's nothing on the slide about Catholicism, about mortal sins, about any of that. The witness was explaining his reasoning. I don't think it was intentional on part of the witness either. If we look at his interview of Ms. Clancy, one of the things that this witness has to do is determine whether the defendant knew the wrongfulness of her conduct. And that can be either that it was criminally wrong or morally wrong. And he explored that with her in the interview and asked her about whether she knew it was legally wrong, and she said she had no concept of legal consequences. And then he went on to ask her about moral wrongfulness and about her religion and whether she knew it was morally wrong, and she did say that she had knowledge that suicide was considered sinful. So I believe that's where the witness was going in trying to explain his reasoning. I don't think he was intentionally trying to inflame the jury or cause an issue in this case. I know I certainly wasn't, because I didn't ask a question about her religion or a question that would invoke that kind of response. I asked him to explain what was on the slides, and that's not on the slides. So there was no intentional conduct by the Commonwealth. That was not where I intended to go with this questioning, and I don't think that the witness intended to do any harm either. He was just explaining his rationale. So I would ask that the jury be instructed to disregard the answer, and I can speak to the witness and tell him not to talk about that reasoning for behind his thoughts, that he can testify about his conclusions, but to leave that portion of his reasoning out of his testimony.
Well, here's a concern I have, is what the witness did say in regards to go to God, baby, go to God. That was statements that had been made in evidence already. And then he indicated that was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God. All right. Now we're getting a little closer to problematic area. Then he testified she was raised as a Catholic. And as I understand Catholic considerations, that's not necessarily what happens. How is any of that proper at this point? But it was not, well, I'm not going to declare a mistrial at this time. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring the jury in. I'm going to tell them to disregard it. I'm going to tell them that's an inappropriate area of inquiry, and that this witness's understanding of Catholic dogma or Catholic teaching is irrelevant. There's no evidence of his background or training or having been to the seminary or any of that. And so I think, and that's where he injected that. And so I am giving that, but the Commonwealth, I'm going to strongly, and perhaps the strongest language, talk to him and let him know that he can't go into that. And then my thought is, I'm going to bring the jury back in. I'm going to give them that instruction, and I'm going to send them home. I don't want them leaving here today with the last thing they heard was a discussion about this witness's understanding of the Catholic teaching. That's not the last thing they're going to hear. And so my thought is that as best I can is to address that and minimize the damage or prejudice, because I do presume that this jury will be able to follow those instructions. And so that would be my thought. We'll come back. That will give the Commonwealth plenty of time to talk to this witness, to let him know the areas that he should and should not go into. And then we can come back tomorrow and we can resume his direct examination and cross-examination. All right, so that'll be my thought. We'll bring the jury in. I'll give them that instruction, and then we will recess until tomorrow. Okay?
Your Honor, just for the record, could I note an objection?
Sure, absolutely. All right, so we ready for the jury? Yeah.
all rise. Jurors enter. This court's now in session. Please be seated.
For the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including the defendant and including the 18 jurors.
All right. Well, members of the jury, just before we broke, there was some testimony from that last witness. And I just want to give you some instructions in regards to that testimony. And I just wanted to let the religion that the defendant was raised with is absolutely an inappropriate area of testimony. It is to be stricken. It is not to be considered. I can't be any more clear of that. It cannot be considered. Secondly, the witness's understanding of Catholic teachings and considerations, again, is immaterial, it's irrelevant, it is to be disregarded based on that testimony. All right? And so, because we had a little bit of a delay due to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to excuse you until tomorrow. All right? And so the thought is we'll come in, we'll finish up with this witness. I believe the Commonwealth has another witness at that point, and then we'll talk about where we go. I apologize for any kind of confusion or delay, but I just wanted to make sure you had those instructions with you when you left here today. All right? So, I'm sorry, so I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Court, all rise. Jurors, kindly close your notebooks. Place them on the chairs. This way, please.
Jurors have exited the courtroom. This court's in session. Please be seated.
All right. Counsel, one more time. Can I see it sidebar? All right. So we will be in recess until tomorrow. The anticipation is that the evidence will be done at some point tomorrow, with the thought that most likely we'll have a charge conference sometime probably tomorrow afternoon, and arguments in charge would be on Wednesday. All right. Subject to change, as they always are. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Court, all rise.